quorum, I declare the meeting open. Our first agenda item is to consider manager applicants presented by the Preliminary Screening Committee. And I have a note here from the Screening Committee, the Town of Raleigh Light Plant Manager Preliminary Screening Committee. At a meeting of the Light Plant Manager Preliminary Screening Committee duly held on August 27, 2012, the committee voted to recommend the following candidates to the Municipal Light Board for further review by said board: Daniel Pryor, Shrewsbury, Mass; Stephen Scobie, Bangor, Maine; and Daniel Folding, Newton, New Hampshire. With this recommendation, this committee has completed its task as assigned by the Municipal Light Board. Signed by G. Robert Murray, Chairman of the Preliminary Screening Committee. The other two members of the committee were Personnel Board member Robert Snow and Light Department Manager Jacqueline Vigent. So if I could request a motion to accept the Preliminary Screening Committee report.
Make a motion to accept the meeting report.
Okay, if you could sign that, Dave, for me.
And I'll second that meeting.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Oh, yeah. Where did he sign? Oh. Oh.
Okay. Motion made and seconded to accept the screening committee report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, our next item is our first candidate, appointment Stephen Scobie. Hi, Steve.
How are you? Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this meeting is being audio recorded and is also being video recorded. So, you're off and running.
Welcome. It's Ken Keys,
Ken Key, Steve Secola. Nice to meet you, sir.
David Levesque.
I know.
Nice to meet you.
Okay,
How you doing?
How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Steve, thanks for coming down again. What we want to do is we want to take about an hour of your time and get to know a little bit more about you. And so let's begin by telling us a little bit more about you. Bob and I have met you. Dave and Ken have not. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things you've done, please.
All right. Probably a repeat of a lot of what I told you, gentlemen, but
Please.
I was born in Holton, Maine. When people ask me, where's Holton, Maine? If you go to the end of Interstate 95 North, your heels will be in Holton, Maine, your toes will be in Canada. So it's on the end of Interstate 95. It's a town very similar in size to Raleigh, I would think, about population of about, it used to be 6,000, I think it's a little less than that now. But I lived there all my life, went to the school systems, graduated high school, went to the University of Maine in Orono for 2 years. After my second year, I was, as I tell everyone, I was tired of eating Kraft macaroni and cheese for a living, and I decided to take a year off and work to make some money so I could live a little bit better. And my dad said, you better get some work real quick, and he recommended the Holton Water Company, which is electric, water, sewer, and sewer collection utility in Holton, Maine. I applied, was accepted as summer help. And there's a lot in between, but I fell in love with the place, the job, the work, the crew, and I retired 35 years later. It's other than summer work, it's the only job I ever had in my life.
That was nice.
I loved every minute that I worked as a lineman. About 10 years into my career, I was promoted to line superintendent, which was second in command under the general manager. I was in charge of the entire electric department. The crew that I had slowly shrunk, but it was about ended up 5 linemen and myself took care of the electric department in Holt, Maine. We were isolated up there, as I said, way up there. You have to become pretty independent, so we took it upon ourselves to learn everything we could. Engineers were expensive and a long way away, so we pretty much undertook to be able to take care of any problem that would arise by ourselves. So we had some fairly large projects. We built several substations from the ground up, constructed a 35,000 volt line to loop our supply line so that reliability would be improved, and a lot of different projects like that. But I was in charge of those. Hired a contractor at one time. The first time in 20 some odd years we actually had a contractor on site. Did all the work ourselves mostly. Excuse me, I have an important situation going on with my father, and I'm going to have to excuse myself if I get an important call.
That's more important.
That's fine. I retired from there after 35 years, and the only reason I can give is it just felt like time. I worked in properties management for a few months, and then a job came up with Northeast Public Power Association, and I was hired as a safety trainer. And since the last title I think they gave me was Director of Training at NEPA, but I'm in charge of all the training that goes on there. And here we are.
Steve, you know, you've had an opportunity. You've been down here a couple of times now, and you've been here before because you're familiar with Raleigh.
Yes.
So what can you tell us about what you know about Raleigh? What kind of observations you've had about the town and Raleigh Light, and if you were the general manager, what you can offer Raleigh Light?
Okay. It looks, as I said, like a community very similar to what I had. It was small, quaint, where everybody seems to know everybody, and I already get a sense that it's a community as opposed to just a town. I get that feeling from stopping, and I've had 2 of the linemen from Raleigh as students. One present, one has graduated. The utility appears to be in pretty good shape from what I see. I would always fight the battle with trees. That's a tough one everywhere that I've been. But as far as my impressions, I don't have too many impressions as far as Raleigh Light, other than it seems to be a close-knit organization. I was here for one safety meeting that was held at the Municipal Light Plant, and it just seems like the crew, talking to the crew, that it seems like very similar to where I come from.
Any reaction from the crew that you've worked with? Any reaction about them that you've seen?
I guess I don't really understand your question.
Have you got any impressions about the crew? I mean, you've trained 2 of them.
Yes. Very upstanding young men, very quality people. Someone in my endeavor as a trainer, I try to instill in them that you need to be the type of person that can be counted on when the chips are down, and I get that feeling from both of those gentlemen.
Okay. And one of the things that, you know, we when we were developing the profile of the ideal next general manager, we indicated, the board indicated that they wanted a manager with good technical skills, strong management and business experience. So tell us, how do you match up with that particular profile? And give us some specific examples in your career that would show that you match up with this profile.
As far as technical background, as I stated earlier, we had to be self-sufficient. even if you made a call to get some help, it was 6, 8, 10 hours away. So we had to get the power back on now. So technically, I actually have developed for NEPA capacitor training, voltage regulator training, recloser training, power transformer. I've developed a substation course, the metering course for NEPA. So as far as technical training goes, I think that's probably would be my strong suit. The nuts and bolts and how everything goes together and making it work was what I did for 35 years. The leadership, when you have those personalities in your crew, and I had 5 wonderful men to work for me, those are strong-willed individuals. They have to be for what they do. And you have to know how to handle those gentlemen, and you have to know how to manage them, and you have to recognize that in today's world, people react differently than even my generation. For instance, one person that I brought into the crew was, on the surface, people said he's lazy. Well, he really wasn't lazy. His generation was looking to be told what to do. And once we got through that and we understood him better, ended up being one of the best workers we had at the utility. So you have to look deeper than your own experience when it comes to handling people like that. I would say, fitting the profile, probably, although I was involved to some degree, more on the periphery than in the mainstream of the business side of the business. That would be the challenge for me, would be the business side. I'm familiar with the workings of the utility and accounts receivable, accounts payable, and all those types of things, and cash flow and the rest of that. Inventory, we had to do inventory like everybody else. But I would say, purchasing power was something that I was also involved with, again, but on the periphery. We came up with an RFP to go out and buy power. Buying power when I left the utility 5 years ago was different than it was even 5 years before I retired. So things were changing dramatically, and those are the kind of things that I would see as a challenge.
Well, in terms of the business end of it, because business is a big piece of it,
Absolutely.
the position we're talking to you about is not the head lineman, but is the general manager. So the management of the staff and the management of the operation, which includes the business piece of it, because it is a big business, is a critical piece. You indicate that's an area that poses a challenge to you. If you were named general manager, how are you going to overcome that challenge so that you can properly, adequately lead Rowley Light?
I would say probably the first thing that I would do is talk to the people who work at Rowley Light and find out how things have been done, perhaps minutes of meetings, that type of thing, how things have happened in the past, and also the connections that I have in the industry today. Having worked for NEPA, I'm in about 78 different utilities in New England, and have really got some close connections and close friendships in that endeavor, and I feel pretty comfortable. If this was something that I didn't think I could do, I wouldn't be sitting here. Mm-hmm. I have all confidence that I could do it. It's just, I'm going to be honest and say it's something that I'd have to work at, and part of the answer too is whatever work it took, that's what I would do.
One of the, when we last met, one of the issues that we talked about was the issue of, and the importance of transparency in the operation.
Correct.
What does transparency mean to you? And how do you ensure that it exists in an organization?
Well, transparency to me is just being open and honest. I have friends in this business, as I said, and one gentleman that was a good friend of mine made the big mistake of not informing his light board of, he wanted to make it look good all the time. I won't do that. whatever it is, that's what it is. The truth, open and honest, and if it's not going to be that way here, I really don't want to work here.
When you were at Holton,
Yes, sir.
tell us about situations where you had to make sure that things were transparent. What did you, as a water and light company, do to ensure transparency so that the board, so that the community knew what was going on at Holton?
Obviously the books are open public record, so that is given. The workings of the utility, there were monthly meetings, and the public was invited to attend. The board at Holton was an electric board, completely. Let me just qualify. The board of our utility was elected. We were a quasi-municipal. There were 100 shares of stock in our company. The town of Holton owned all 100 shares, and they were in the safe at the town office. So that we were a stock company, but the town owned all the stock. So the Maine legislature had to pass a special act so that we could form our utility, and they did so. And it's a fairly secure situation because of financing and all. You weren't able to sell those shares of stock until you were solvent, if you will. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but public open meetings are the only way to go. And if you try to hide something, I guess I don't see any benefit in that. It is what it is, and you have to attack it that way. I see problems as things that need to be addressed and overcome, and you can't do that by hiding anything or not disclosing those kind of things. So if that helps you, I guess that would be my answer.
One of the things that is a big part of the general manager's job is working with the commissioners, the board
Yes.
right here, the Raleigh staff,
Yes.
both the technical and the administrative staff, the town government of Raleigh itself, its board of selectmen,
Mm-hmm.
and its town departments. So that's a huge part of the job. So tell us about, in your previous experience, and I want you to be real specific, how you would approach this in Raleigh. Tell us about how you worked with your board, your staff, the town government, the town departments while you were at Holton. And how do you see that transferring over here into Raleigh?
We worked very closely with the town. We did a lot for the town. The light department, Holton Water Company light department was very successful financially, and we would do a lot of things for the town as just a matter of donations or what have you. The school department, I got to be honest, is a pet of mine. I believe strongly in education and training, and we did a lot for the local school department. As far as working with the different departments, the fire department, the police department, we worked hand in hand in a lot of projects, and you want me to get specific. There's so many that it's hard to get specific about any one, but we put the lights up for the baseball field in Holton, Maine, and the fire department had a ladder truck, and our bucket trucks only went up 55 feet, but these towers were 80-foot towers, and we worked together to make the thing work. So as far as what's expected here at Raleigh or how that would translate to Raleigh, that would be up to these gentlemen giving me direction as to how we would work with those town entities, the town authorities, if you will. And if that's what they so desired, I'd be all for it. I think that we could, as always proves out, if we can work together, we're always stronger together than we are as separate entities.
The commissioners would clearly give you direction, but on a day-to-day basis, I would imagine in Raleigh, that there would be times when the DPW would give you a call, the highway department would give you a call, you would give them a call. Tell me about how you worked with those various department heads, and what kind of issues were you helping each other out with?
I think that we would, even within the water company, there were 4 different departments, and we were under one roof, but I had my employees, the water department had their employees, the sewer plant had his employees, and we worked together. When you're small like that, if you don't do that, you can't make it. So that's the way it was in our utility. The outside entities like the Public Works and the Parks and Rec, they call me up, they need a couple of guys. I will tell you this, if it was something that I needed, if I needed my guys because of any storm or restoration or any issues that way, our work came first. But as soon as we could, we would, give them 1 or 2 guys to help them out. But so that's the way I approached it where I worked.
You spoke at the last meeting, the last time we met. You talked about the importance of having a quality staff, and you talked about your competitiveness.
Yes.
And your emphasis on safety. Tell us more about that. I want to know about your crew at Holton. What made them good? How did they get good? And give me an example of things that they had to do that an outsider would say, that's a good department.
Well, I know that I come into this situation. If I were to step into this situation, I come in after the fact. I'm a strong believer in good hires. If you hire good people, they'll stay good people. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have a say in the hire of all the guys that work for me. Also, I could say that I know at least 2 of the people at Raleigh, and they would be the. I hope they don't hear this, but they'd be the kind of guys I'd hire myself. I feel that strongly about both of them, and I don't feel that way about all the students that come through my school. But those were good hires, both of those young men. What makes them stand out is character, and again, those are things you hire. It's a little more difficult after the fact, but I have a fairly high standard that they have to meet, and I hold their feet to the fire. And I guess you could say my intent is to run a very tight ship. This is the way we do things, and we do it in a safety first, quality second, and quantity third is my mantra. And that's not original with me. That's something that I heard many years ago, and I strongly believe in that. The last part of your question was specific. Would you?
I was wanting to know how specific examples of building a staff and achieving quality and high standards within Holton.
The training that you offer is not only, listen, Holton has not many utilities around, but there are 2 more. We're fairly close. And if you don't pay your guys, what is there to keep them from going somewhere else? So you have to create the very best place there is to work. There has to be other value other than just dollars. And if you create a place where they can grow, where they can feel satisfied, where they can feel a sense of accomplishment, they stay. And that's what we did at Holton. But I think that training and education takes care of a lot of those situations.
In terms of Raleigh, you come on board and you're the new general manager.
Mm-hmm.
How do you establish clear expectations from the beginning. How do you put in place those high standards that you talk about so that people understand? I'm not suggesting that there's issues here, but how do you establish yourself as in charge, and how is it clear what's expected, that you expect of them?
Well,
And what can they expect of you?
that's right. And they'll expect that I will never ask for anything I won't do myself or wouldn't do myself. And I think that those high standards start with leadership. I think the leader of the utility sets the standard for everybody else by his demeanor, his conduct, his professionalism, his fairness, his firmness, and his resolve to do what's right. As I stated in the first meeting, I have a Native American background. My grandfather went to the 3rd grade, but he was the wisest man I ever knew in my life. And he said these words to me many years ago. I was real little, but I remember. Do what's right, let the chips fall where they may. And I try to live by that.
You've been in the business a while. By your own resume, you worked at Holton for 36 years. You've been at NEPA for 3, so you've got close to 40 years in the business.
Yes.
So the business has changed in 40 years.
Yes, it has.
And it's going to change more.
Yes, it is.
You've also got a unique perspective because you travel to all of the public power members
Yes.
throughout the Northeast. What are the things that you see happening out in the future, if you can project out, what's going to happen to public power? What are the things that Raleigh needs to prepare for changes, whether it's equipment, whether it's technology, whether it's purchasing of power? And secondly, as you go around and look at all these various different facilities, what do you see? Who's doing things right? And what are the things they're doing that you could say, wow, that they're out ahead. We need to be doing things like that.
I think that technology is changing tremendously, but I guess I'd put it this way. I don't think it's ever good to be first, but you sure don't want to be last. And let someone else be the proving ground. Let's take what really works, that we know works, and apply that. I think utilities do things oftentimes just for the sake of doing them, and I'm not a big proponent of that. Any move that I would suggest that would be made would be something that benefits Raleigh. It wouldn't be just for the fanfare of doing something. As far as the future, no one knows the future exactly, but I think public power is in good standing and is going to be even stronger in the future. There are a lot of communities that are trying to go back to their municipal electric utility, but that doesn't mean that we should rest on our laurels. I think that we, as small utilities, an organization like the one I work for now, Northeast Public Power Association, I think we are stronger as a group as opposed to individual utilities. And that doesn't mean to say we do everything like someone else does, but I think that our numbers are greater. They hear us louder in Washington if we go as a single voice. So I see good horizons for public power. On the other side of that coin is we are responsible for everything that the big utilities are responsible for. So we have to be very efficient in how we spend our dollars and how we spend our resources and our energies, rather than just doing things for the sake of doing them.
As you know, we've been asking you a lot of questions, or I have, and the board is going to have some additional questions for you. But I'm curious, as you look at your career, why is Raleigh the next logical step for your career, and what kind of commitment are you prepared to make to the town?
That's an excellent question. It's one that I've thought about now for several weeks since I first talked to you. I've been the second command, but I've never been the first in command, if you will, as far as managing a utility. I feel like I do have a lot to offer, and as I stated in the other meeting, it's difficult for me to speak about myself in this way, but I get excited and I get fired up, and I will tell you straight up, and I think it was part of our discussion before. If you're happy with the status quo, then I'm probably not your man. If you want somebody to come in and watch the paint peel, I'm probably not your man. I'm not talking about just doing projects for the sake of doing them, but picking and choosing where we need to shore up, what may be needing shored up. We'll go after those aggressively, and I think for public power, kind of tied into the other point we were just talking about, for us to remain where we are, I think we have to recognize that what are we offering but service? So our reliability needs to be the best. We need, and as recently shown after the snowstorm and Halloween and Irene, public power utilities responded, and people were back in power much quicker than some of the larger utilities for obvious reasons, and that is, we know our community, we know our lines, we know our people, and when you have a personal stake in it, which, as I told you in the other meeting as well, if it works out, I'm here. I will have a personal stake in this place, and it will be the competitive the competitive side will come out, and we'll be busy doing things to make it as good as we can possibly make it.
Final question from me, and then I'm going to turn it over to the board. I've asked you a number of questions, and the subcommittee asked you a number of questions, and it was focusing on just this issue of whether you would fit
Yes.
within Raleigh. So let me flip it a little bit and to ask you, what is it that Raleigh has to do to make this job a fit for you, so that you would say, this is the place I want to work?
I think that probably the biggest thing, I guess the most important thing that I could say in that respect would be to forge a good relationship with these three gentlemen. It has to be, a working relationship. We may not always agree, but as long as the focus is doing what's right for Raleigh Municipal Light Plant, I'll be all for it. So I guess to make me comfortable would be nothing more than us being on the same page, and I listen, and once we come to a consensus, that'll be it. Whether my side was the exact opposite, once we come to a consensus, then that's where we'll go. So I feel comfortable with that. I don't have any agendas. I don't have any axes to grind, so to speak. I love this work. I love the utility industry. I love the camaraderie and the brotherhood that seems to be prevalent in this community and this industry, and I kind of miss that. One thing you asked about commitment. I will work as long as somebody will have me. I've decided. I retired from a utility, but I didn't quit. I was working. Within 2 days, I was working again, and retirement doesn't seem to fit me very well. I want to work, and I'll work as long. I anticipate working well into my 70s, and as long as I'm effective and I'm doing a job and doing a good job, I plan on working.
Okay. Gentlemen?
That was one of the questions I was going to ask. How long you planned on working if things went?
Certainly, and that's
Well.
that's a legitimate question. I think one other thing I'd like to say, I'm actually staying in Methuen, Mass. As we speak during the week, and I go home on probably every second or third weekend. If I were to take a position like this, I would want to be here, and I'd want to stay here and live here as close as I possibly could afford, as I said. But I think that's a given. You have to, if you're going to be an electric utility serving the people of this community, you need to be here. And I would just say that there's some lease agreements that probably have just been signed, and they're at least a year along. So I would not leave I wouldn't leave any company with that type of situation. I'd feel obligated to take care of that myself if I had to. So that answer.
Yeah, pretty much. The other question I had is, we're so much into computers. I haven't heard you say too much about computers. Are you into them? Are you afraid of them, or what's the situation with computers?
Well, I got one in my pocket.
Yeah.
I've got probably. This is almost embarrassing, but I probably got 7 computers. I got a work computer. I've got an apartment computer. I got 2 at home. I've got. I'm familiar with almost everything that Microsoft does, and I've got a couple of Apple computers. So
Yeah, okay.
I kind of like them, and I use them as a tool like a screwdriver.
I just hadn't heard any talk about them, and I was just
Yes.
curious how you work with them. I don't have any other questions.
I got one here. Power supply is about 75% of our expense and the largest influence on our rates. What has been your experience in purchasing power?
I was involved with, in where I come from, Holton, Maine is not electrically connected to the continental United States. All power that was in the northern Maine comes in through Canada. And we actually purchased power from Central Maine Power at one point. We purchased our power from Maine Public Service almost my entire career. Then deregulation hit. And now we're out in the market looking for power, and we basically became a power aggregator, if you will. All of our customers, we went out to get a price for electricity. This competitive market that they talked about really didn't form for us. We did talk to several people in the power marketing business, and we developed an RFP and just went out on behalf of all of our customers. We didn't buy anything on the spot market. We were locked in for everything that we used. We had a contract that was a total needs contract, and it ended up being the most economical for us. In Massachusetts, I will be honest, and I know a little bit about MWAC. I'm not sure how everything would work, but again, if I didn't think I could handle that, I wouldn't be sitting here. I've got a lot of friends and people in this business who I would lean upon as, what are you doing in keeping up to pace with what's available. I will say straight up, I mentioned this before, green power is an important source today, but only if it's economical for my customers would I be interested in pursuing a lot of green power. That's my personal philosophy, and I think that's, the best price is where I would go.
What role do you think the board should take in running the Raleigh Municipal Light?
Well, especially for me in particular, I would be leaning on you gentlemen a lot in the early days. That's a great question. The board that I worked under, my general manager had more direct connection with them, but they were great individuals in the community. I think that providing direction and would be obviously the first item, but I would need to work really closely with you gentlemen in the early days to get my feet under me and get going. And I would anticipate working pretty closely with you, at least, always, but especially in the early days. the director's job is different than the manager's job, but I think that you people are local here. You know this utility. You know these people, and I would lean heavily upon you to get me in the right direction when it comes to that.
I'm all set.
Okay, Steve. What expectation would you have in the range of a salary type situation?
Well, presently, it's difficult for me to put a number on what I presently make because I get a salary and they take care of my housing. They give me a car, and all those benefits together is going to be in the neighborhood of, as near as I can honestly put, and I won't overstate it, but I think it's around $103,000, I'm going to guess. And I guess what I would say is I wouldn't be looking to take a pay cut to do the job.
So does that $103,000 include salary plus the car plus the value of the house?
Housing, yes.
So if we extracted the house out and we extracted the car out, do you know what you earn for a salary?
I'm going to say it's pretty close to, I know this may sound corny, but I don't really do it for the money. I'm going to say it's probably between 85 and 90 would be the total salary,
Okay.
actual salary.
All right. I mean, that helps. You're one of those guys that doesn't look at your paycheck.
I haven't cashed a check in probably 40 years. I got married.
Oh.
Like the rest of us.
Just want to remind you that you're on television, so she might have heard that. Okay. So
Well, she's kept me around this long.
okay. Excuse me, Bob. Continue. Dave.
I hear you want to work forever, but what is ever? I mean, how many years are we talking, roughly? Say,
Minimum 10 years, probably
10 years.
a minimum of 10, yeah. That would be, I wouldn't even think about it for at least 10 more and maybe 14 more.
okay, thank you.
So you're living in Methuen right at this point?
Yes,
Okay, so you try to get closer to,
I would like to. It's about 30 minutes away. That's
Okay.
To me, that's out there a little too far. My own crews, I require that they be within a certain distance of the utility, and that would be the outer extreme that I would have allowed my crew. So I don't know what you expect out of the manager here, but I'll be I can't help it, I'll be a hands-on guy when it comes to the power system here. I still, once in a while, jump in the bucket and do things. I was down in Pasco, Rhode Island up until this year, staying down there. The school was actually located there. And, during the snowstorm and the hurricane and whatnot, I was out working with the crews and listen, when the wind's blowing and the power's out, you got to be there. You got to be out there. In a manager's position, we had an ice storm that Holton only had, and the manager helped me a lot by staying in the office and fielding all those and prioritizing the restoration effort. So that would be what I would see as one of my main functions in that situation. Speaking of that, I have a couple of questions, if this is appropriate time or not.
sure?
Why not?
Is there a hospital in Raleigh?
No,
How about elderly housing?
yes.
A lot?
49 units.
Is it one area, or is it?
Well, it's 7 different buildings,
Mhm.
and I think there's 2, 4, 6 units per building.
I would say probably one of my early tasks that I would undertake would be to, obviously look the entire system over and find out the highest priority accounts, and then develop plans. If we lose power, how do we get these back on first? And
Okay, yeah, there is a nursing home also.
yeah, that was kind of together with those. A question for you, gentlemen: if we did have a major outage, and we had the occasion to put your lights on as opposed to your neighbor's lights on, who would you want to go on first?
Neighbors.
What they've done in the past, I think, is they do the most out, and then they work down. That's what I understand.
That's a
Get
great.
the most that are out on first.
Exactly. That's a great plan, unless there are nursing homes and,
Yeah,
and,
then there would
and
be a
critical
priority.
care. Those would be priority, and
Right.
then the biggest amount. Sure, that's pretty standard procedure. I was very pleased to see that there was no hesitation in your answer.
Well, I've been there, done that.
I know you. I know. I figured that, and
And
that came
at one
across.
point, the town decided to shut off half the streetlights because they didn't want to fund them.
Mm-hmm.
So the first streetlight that went off was the one next to my house.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, when I was in the Richdale store, there was a lady there complaining about her streetlight being shut off. And she says, "I bet you still got your streetlight." And I says, "No, ma'am. Mine was the first one that went off."
That tells me a lot about Rowley Municipal Light Plant. Just little factoids like that tells me a lot
I
about.
mean, that's how I
things are.
felt about it. I mean, it was, I'm not gonna have mine on if somebody else can't have theirs on.
That's a huge.
And to this day, I don't have one.
My town did the same thing. We let the police chief in the town. He decided what was to stay on safety wise and what could be removed, and we went through the process that way.
Yeah.
And that was really nice, because when people complained and wanted back on, I would refer them to the police chief.
Exactly. And we did basically the same thing here, Steve. We actually formed a committee.
Yeah, that's the best way.
And
to
we
do
turned it over to the Board of Selectmen because we felt that the Board of Selectmen were the ones that had appropriated the money to keep the lights on.
That's right.
And we formed a committee, and the committee would investigate. If somebody applied for a streetlight, they would look at it and make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
Certainly, and in the safety aspect of it was their responsibility as
Exactly.
well. So
Yeah. And we also offered rental streetlights.
yes.
We actually took a rental yard light and put it on a street pole facing in
Yep.
instead of out, so that we knew it was a rental.
Yeah, that's a good plan. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I have no way of knowing, but I was very pleased to hear there was no hesitation in your voice, because it's not that way everywhere.
No, I understand. I understand.
Anything else that I was, when you're writing, you think, I'm trying to think, I can't think of any other questions that I would have.
When would you be able to start?
That was a question that I had anticipated. I wouldn't really want to leave the organization that I work for in a hurt, but I've already spoken to them, spoken to my executive director, and the more time that you could give me, the better. They have to get somebody in there to train these apprentices, and apparently guys like me don't come along too often, but there's obviously people coming all the time. So the more time you could give me, the better. I would say the optimum time would be to start at the first of next year, but that's going to be completely up to you.
So if we had said to you, November 1,
I would have, before I would have said yes to you, I would have talked to my executive director and said, I may be out of here on November 1, what do you think? I would have done that.
so it's doable.
It's doable.
Thank you. Gentlemen, other questions? Have we answered all? we answered all yours?
I think so.
Well, Steve, thanks for coming in. We'll get back to you real soon in terms of the next step, and I guess that's it.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you and appreciate
like
all
that.
your help. Nice to meet you, sir.
Same here.
Steve.
Nice to see you again. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck, gentlemen, and I'm sure you'll do the right thing. Thank you, sir.
We have a few minutes before our next candidate comes.
What do you think?
Guy's impressive. Seems like he's always been a number 2 guy, huh? Well, that question on, we talked about the no car and hiring, I mean, the no car and the housing.
Well, I don't know if anything was said about a car.
He had a car.
You mentioned no housing, no car.
No,
No, that was to determine the
in
salary.
her situation. Oh, I said if you took the car out, I wanted to try to
Took
figure
the
out.
car out in the housing.
That's
And
correct.
you asked what he would take.
I asked him what he earned. He said he thinks he earned 85,000.
So he's not saying he would.
No,
What was he
didn't say-
saying?
He said that what he wanted to do was to not
Go under
take-
his 103.
go under his total package. So
Okay, 103.
um, so
103,000.
103,000, which includes the car, which includes the
Correct, yeah. No, I knew
So
that.
if you were to do a salary and a vehicle, that's what he's looking at. And in terms of his always being number 2, you're correct.
Yeah.
But at Holton, he was in charge of the electrical. His manager, who's still there,
Does both.
is actually responsible for the water. But his ultimate responsibilities is water, sewer, and electrical. Steve was responsible for all of electrical, but you're right, he was the number 2. And at NEPA, he's the technical trainer for
Right.
for the it's an
Like the
organization of
safety.
4.
Yeah. What's the next one?
The next one comes at 6:15. Bob, I don't know if you want to go into recess or something at this point until 6:15, or how you want to work this out.
Yeah, we might want to do that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
rather than just be sitting here
Get a drink of water and do something.
like lumps on a log.
I mean, as a gentleman,
He's not out there right now.
so when he comes in, we could actually start that earlier
He
too.
could, yes.
Okay.
Well,
Is that
go to
okay?
recess and
Yeah, I think we can go into recess. Nathan, if you wanted to let us into recess, we can come back in about 15 minutes or sooner,
10 minutes.
if you want to do that for us. We were just in recess for a short time. Okay, here we are. We're back again. So, Rick, you wanna
Okay.
introduce?
Well, welcome. Thanks for coming in. I understand you're on vacation. Hopefully it was a good one.
It was very good, thank you.
Terrific. Well, what I want to do, Dan, is I want to take a bit of time, similar to what we did before, because Ken and Dave didn't have the chance to meet with you. So I'd like you to just kind of bring them up to speed and probably enlighten Bob and I with a little more information about yourself, some of the things you've been doing, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, excellent. I guess starting with background in education. By trade, I'm an electrical engineer. I've always worked for a utility in very different aspects over my career. I also am a registered professional engineer in Massachusetts in electrical. I found that some of the municipals, as they advertise such openings as the general manager require, a registered engineer. I understand Raleigh does not, but that sort of comes with the package. And I find that in today's world, having someone that really knows the basics of distribution, as well as someone that has the capability for what the future may bring, are very important aspects. One of the things we're concerned about in my current position, albeit in materials, is smart grid and the impact that could have on the network, and of course in my present position on materials, in that there could be many changes to our networks because of that, albeit for green and energy-saving reasons. Also in my background, I chose midpoint in my career to get a master's in business administration, because I thought that beyond an engineering background, that would enable me to branch out further in the utility world as it did. So starting out as a design engineer in distribution, I really enjoyed the one-on-one aspect of working with our linemen, our underground splicers, our substation people, in working with them off hours as an on-call supervisor, but also during the days to understand the tools and equipment they used, and learned an awful lot by asking them questions and having them explain to me a little bit about how they learned their work, what were some of the OSHA regulations that were of most concern to them, etc. So I enjoyed the one-on-one aspect, but also had to understand that I was also off hours a supervisor and had to run the line crews. In those days, we did our own switching, so we had to write our own switching orders and make sure that the network was stable. And we, to help us get through periods of trouble, isolation of circuits, things like that. And not to mention maintaining safety at all times, particularly working at night. I decided then to move on, enjoying the one-on-one aspect so much, I decided to move on and get involved in training. So I got into the department and eventually became the manager of our department that at the time was called T&D Work Methods for transmission and distribution. And so we had some very interesting work we did at the time, whereupon we would see that a regulation might change, a safety rule might have been updated, and it was necessary to redesign and redeploy grounding equipment for the distribution lines or the transmission lines, the substations. So we did all that, and of course with that came the culture change, the change management to deal with the workers and help them to understand that their safety was important, and something that might have been a little heavier to lift than in the past was important to do and do correctly to maintain their personal safety and to make sure that the system was updated from the tools and equipment perspective. So I really enjoyed that because it had both the technical work in it and the one-on-one training and work with not just our represented workforce, but the heads of the labor unions as well that were interested in knowing what is the company cooking up, and hopefully that will improve our safety as well. That training experience led to an assignment to become involved in our HVDC transmission line to Canada, and I became on that project the T&D advisor that helped them obtain the licensing for the line and then designed the maintenance tools and did the training so that we could maintain that transmission line hot if necessary. So it, has been a growing, developing sort of experience, and even to this day, I never stop learning. There's always someone more experienced than me that probably has something to say that I could learn about that would broaden my overall utility experience. From that point on, I decided that it might be interesting to branch out into another aspect of training, and I went into our human resources department and then became involved in how we train our new supervisors. And that is, in today's world, totally a human resource job to make sure that a supervisor that is new to the job, whether from outside the company or coming from the workers themselves, knows and understands the labor agreement and how that works, and basically gets some training and coaching on how to be a good supervisor. Understanding that a supervisor isn't necessarily a cop in the sense of trying to catch people doing things wrong, but a mentor who is there to help people grow and develop and become safe and productive, then using discipline only when necessary for hopefully the few that may fall off from that. I also learned at the same time our positive discipline process, that is a progressive step process that helps an employee having problems, even if they're not their own personal fault, maybe something going on in their family that could be affecting their work, helping them to understand that although it was their problem to solve and that we didn't want to lose a valuable employee, we wanted to partner with them and work with them and offer them resources, albeit EAP or other outside resources, to try to help them or their family resolve a problem that could be impacting their work. And we found that process, progressive step discipline, to be very successful and also withstand challenges such as arbitration cases, where I had to testify once as to the nature of the process and how we could use it at the time. So I guess having said that, an opportunity came up to become an administrator back in electric operations. It happened to be at our affiliate in Providence, Rhode Island, and I had some interesting challenges there. First, to manage the company budget, to make sure that everything got paid for right from an accounting perspective, to report to our executives locally in Rhode Island and to our corporate executives on our spending plans and our budget performance, to make projections, and to try to manage the budget and our spending through the different departments in such a way as to obviously make our financial goals. At the same time period, we had to implement a new software system in the company that was our financial and accounting system. I was responsible to make sure that everyone in Rhode Island in our affiliate got the proper training and knew how to use it, not just properly but accurately, because even in a software system, the data still has to be correct. I also got very good exposure to what I'll call community service and community presence. It is still, and was very important at the time in Rhode Island, that the company have a very public posture. So certain people in the company were asked to take part in off-hours activities, community events, and I was asked to do that and represent the company. One particular activity we did was called Christmas in April, where one weekend every year volunteers from the local colleges and local suppliers would donate building supplies, and we would organize with some of the large companies in Rhode Island a bunch of volunteers to rehabilitate several homes, have the people move out briefly and then move in to a restored home that met the code. And my job in that was vice president of the nonprofit and organizer of all the logistics. So what I had to do with my team was take all the paint and the brushes and the tools and organize them into carts that could be used and labeled to go to each site, and make sure that the various trucks we used got those materials to the sites on time. And so that was very interesting. It reflected back to when I began my career in electric design. There was a lot of work with the various towns to have them approve our poll petitions. And I found it very interesting, on the one hand, to work with our designers to lay out an electric line, an expansion, perhaps a new development, and yet on the other hand, have to be at the selectmen's meetings as a company representative and defend that design in very clear and simple terms that everyone could understand as to why we had to set a new pole there or why we had to tunnel across someone's driveway, because the abutters, of course, were all there wondering about this new intrusion in their neighborhood. So it was a nice, an interesting balance between trying to do the most practical and safe design and yet knowing that one had to defend that and hopefully have the selectmen approve that in a more public forum. So I was in my area, in the Hopedale and Marlborough and Attleboro areas at the time. I had to attend the municipal meetings and make sure that we answered all the questions and hopefully got approval of those petitions. And leaving Providence, there was an opportunity to then get involved in materials that the utilities use. And the company at the time desired to consolidate all of their electric materials at one distribution center, try to incorporate some new software, negotiate the consolidation of that work with the various locals that it would impact. And I was asked to do that and started that in 1997. And we went for 10 years in a lease space in Franklin, Mass. And then in 2007, we moved into our Sutton facility, where my office currently is. And we've since taken on the Legacy Keyspan gas materials that used to be headquartered at another site. So I think as I look back on my resume and my brief story for you, I think it's good to summarize to say the skill sets are the same, number one. I've never stopped learning, number two. I've always found there's something new and interesting to do. And I think I have ranged in responsibility from having many people work for me to being an individual contributor. When I was a designer or when I was doing the budgeting and financial work. And so I've been able to be very adaptable and able to take on different assignments.
Dan, one of the things I want to follow up to a point, and it was a point we made at the earlier interview, and that is when we took a look at what we wanted for our ideal general manager. One of the aspects was somebody with some municipal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And though you touched on the fact that you've had some involvement with municipalities, the key difference between you in the profile and you and the other candidates, frankly, that we are speaking to tonight, is that you come from a major corporation, not a municipality.
Correct.
Tell us about how you see that transition to go from huge corporation to a small municipal light department, from an organization with vast resources to an organization with limited resources, from an organization that had a lot of staff unionized
Yes.
to small staff non-union.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would be a transition, very frankly. But I think on the one hand, as I told you my story, I've been through many different transitions, not just in scope, but in levels of responsibility and type of work. The one, of course, common generic has been the utility, the nature and knowledge of an electric utility for most of my career, and the ability to be adaptable. Specific, though, to a municipal light plant, I think I would rely heavily on the light commissioners and their advice and offer my experience in dialogue such as this and say, here's what I see from my experience. What do you see? Because I believe you are closest to what sort of things or ideas I might have would work within the town, what the citizens would accept, and what kind of things would not. Because one thing that has been clear throughout my career is you always have a boss. There's never a time you usually don't while you're working. And it's important to understand the needs and the wants and the goals of your boss or your superiors. But I would rely very heavily on your advice and guidance to make sure that my experience is used in a proper way. Regarding the size of the staff, in some ways a large organization can be I'll say, not as easy to get the work done as it might be in a smaller one. In some ways, dealing with an organization that has a labor agreement and a represented workforce may not be as easy or flexible than in one that does not. So I think the real critical here is to understand that most people come to work and want to do a good job. Most people want some feedback on how they're doing, especially when they're doing something right, safely, or well. Most people want to know, no matter what size the staff is, most people want to know what's coming ahead of us, what are our challenges. They'd like to participate in a discussion about our goals and how everyone in their own distinct job might want to contribute to them. And as such, I think those principles are the same, no matter what the size of your organization is. And I honestly and frankly think such a job in a municipal light plant would actually be easier in terms of how to get things done with the guidance of the light commissioners than one in which you have to deal with people in different states to get something done.
You've been here a few times now,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you've done a little bit of homework on Rowley.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about what you've seen here at Rowley? What have been your observations? And what do you think you have to offer Rowley?
One of the things I've noticed, not just of Rowley, but of many municipal light plants, is that reliability has been very much up front, along with customer focus and efficiency. And the municipals have done a very good job at stormproofing, albeit with covered wire, reclosers, spacer cable, Hendrix cable. And as such, a lot of good work has already occurred in Rowley to that aspect. In my current responsibilities, I have to worry a lot about emergencies and contingencies. And what if the tropical storm comes this way? What will be our material provisions and our ability to ramp up, secure, and deploy materials to all the line crews that might need it? So there's some commonality there. But I also think that the aspects I would be most concerned about are who does what are the light commissioners' opinions about how the work is getting done, an openness to my suggestions as to how to do it either more safely, more efficiently, or recommendations I might make or my staff might make about other ways that reliability could be improved in the town. For example, cost versus perceived benefit, or even analyzed benefit in terms of improving reliability further. And one aspect I mentioned last time that I'm still very interested in is things as simple as the fact that the distribution system in town also uses step-down transformers. There are several sites around town, one of them very near Summer Street, where you have 333 kVA step-downs. I'd be very concerned about learning about how one backs those up, because where I come from, I have probably 12 of those in my yard, but I'd be very interested in making sure that the light commissioners are satisfied that our backup provisions are adequate for poles, cable, conductor, transformers of various types, so that if one of them failed, we know what the plan is and we know what we're going to do. Or if a storm comes up, we all know and we've agreed to what the contingency plan is, what sort of mutual aid we'll use, where it might come from, how we'll pay for it, so that when those emergencies occur, what we're doing is implementing the plan. We're not running around in a panic wondering what to do. And I have found in most cases, my staff will operate in a very calm and proper way when they know what the plan is, and we simply execute the plan.
You talk about the plan.
Yes.
And if you were offered the position, you'd probably come on board in November, December, right when the weather is not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot of time to create a plan, but a plan needs to be created if one doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Because an emergency could be right on you immediately. how do you see yourself making that initial transition in? How do you see yourself making that kind of review of what exists and what needs to be done so that you create the plan with the commissioners?
Well, first of all, I would build on the basic research I've already done. For example, the Northeast Public Power Association has a very good mutual aid process. Is that the one Raleigh uses, for example? I would also have a lot of questions of my staff and of the light commissioners, and through those questions and my ramping up as quickly as possible, I think that would be a great assessment for myself as well as the commissioners as to what about this, and this, to make sure I knew everything I needed to know. But in that same process, I would have asked the commissioners your opinions, your knowledge, combined with that of my staff, and then I would want to talk about how comfortable we are together, collectively, for some future emergency.
I spoke earlier about a profile that we did before we began the recruitment process.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that profile said that our ideal manager had good technical skills and strong management and business experience.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us how you match that profile and give me some specific examples of how you match or where you don't match within that profile.
I think technically I would hope to be your best candidate. I think as an electrical engineer with a lot of technical experience in electric utility, as a registered professional engineer in Massachusetts, I think I would bring some strong credentials and experience in terms of understanding electrical distribution systems, substations, the various components, as well as a very critical part of that I think is important in any operation, and that is being able to work with your direct reports and translate that technical knowledge into growth and development for them. For example, assessing how well the linemen know the system. Being able to answer their questions about a new recloser or smart grid piece of apparatus that might go up. Being able to be not just the superior, but the trainer of someone, so I know it as well myself as the manager as the staff does that would have to utilize and understand it. So technically I think I would be very strong. I think from the various documents I've submitted, including my last performance appraisal where I currently work, it is clear that I value communication, collaboration, and openness with my staff as a means of getting a team environment put together so that the goals, as laid out by the light commissioners, turn out to be a strategy that I and my staff would want to develop in hopes of getting everyone on board to achieve our goals. And I honestly feel that in terms of safety, a reliable system, and customer focus, I would see no reason why Raleigh could not be number one in all those aspects. And I would work tirelessly to see where I could do that.
You say that
Mm-hmm.
ideally we'd be number one. And that's a good thing to say, a nice thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
How do you say that? I mean, not how do you say that. How
How
do you
do it?
that? And what are the things you need to do? And then secondly,
Yeah.
I want to get back to, I think, a piece
Mhm.
of the question that I didn't hear is, when we talk about the technical skills, we also talked about the managerial and
Yeah.
business piece.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to talk a little bit more of that, please.
Sure. One of the things that I think dovetails very nicely with feedback and feedback to your staff is, for example, working with people, going out with the line crews, performing what I would call safety reviews, safety inspections. The last time I met in Raleigh, I drove by and made a short stop, didn't get in anybody's way, but just did a quick safety review of the Raleigh crews that were working there and made some observations. So it is basically engaging the people you work with and providing feedback to make sure they know what is expected and how they're doing, and providing further growth, development, training, whatever might be needed to make sure they feel very strong and very secure so that they can be safe. That also ties to, I think, management. In today's world, I think every worker has a lot of expectations. I think a worker, no matter what your level or what your job, would like to not just have feedback, but would like to some degree to be included in what's going on. I think in today's world, it is not a good thing to, without good reason, to be withholding information that could be interesting or relevant to your staff. It's better to share it so that as something new comes in, for example, smart grid, they already know a little bit about it, a little bit about its significance, how it might change the way we do our business, and what's in it for the customer. And why might we someday spend money on smart grid? What might be the process by which we define with the light board how that might happen in the towns, in the munis, and how everybody on the staff has to have a certain understanding of it to support it and appreciate it. To do that, I would make sure that they had staff meetings periodically at which we talked a lot about our goals and some strategies to achieve those goals and got their input as well, because I think that works quite well today to get everybody on one team with one plan. I used that as an example the last time I was in Raleigh, where in our warehouse we have 30 workers, and we've talked to them a little bit about smart grid. There's a pilot going on in my current employer, and now they're so interested in it because we simply mentioned it that when a new shipment of the stuff comes in, they all come over to me and say, hey, more of the stuff came in, you want to see it? So there's a little bit of excitement about it. It's not something that's isolated or secret or too technical for people to understand. It's something that could impact our business, and therefore why not share that information and have people welcome something that's new and different. So it's a lot of communication and collaboration, and I well understand that in this sort of forum, not today's interview, but this sort of position, those things are very important with the town as well as the light commissioners so that we have one plan. And I'm not verging off on something different without knowing that it has the support and endorsement of the light commissioners as well.
We spoke last time about the issue of transparency
Mhm.
and its importance. What does transparency mean to you, and how do you ensure that it exists at Raleigh? And how did you exist? Is it an issue at Grid?
It can be, and it has a lot to do with who you work for, and it has a lot to do with understanding the needs of your, what I'll say, boss or superiors. And it is very clear to me from my research, be it the town meeting warrant or the Raleigh Light website, that transparency and communication about what's going on and what are our activities that we're undertaking, what are we doing, what have we done to be safe and reliable and cost-focused, are very, very important. And as such, I think it has to be on your mind all the time. In a similar way, albeit in a different forum, I have a boss, and that boss wants to know not what I'm doing every day, but what are my key activities and strategies that I've developed to get my goals done. And I think that leads to a degree of empowerment and yet a balance so that my boss knows I'm spending my time, and therefore my staff's time, on all the right things. But indeed, they are the right things that will help us to achieve our goals. It takes a level of communication that I think is mutually agreed upon, in this case, between the manager and the light board, so that there is and is developed a degree of satisfaction that we're doing the right things and getting the guidance from the board if we're not.
Are you doing the right things at Grid?
I think so.
How do you know that?
From my feedback, for example, my recent performance appraisal, through the years, I've been very successful in attaining my goals in these various aspects. But I've been successful not personally, but in general as a department head, by attaining those goals in the manner in which I've described with my staff.
Working in this particular job, a big part of it is working with the commissioners, three of them here,
Yes.
the Raleigh staff, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
town government, whether it's the Board of Selectmen or whether it is individual departments itself within the town. police, fire, public works, etc. Now, these are some of the things you haven't had to do in the past. So this is all
Correct.
going to be brand new experience for you.
Mhm.
How do you get into even know how you should be approaching that? And what are the things you would be doing as a way of reaching out to the staff and the government and the other departments if you were given this position?
Number one, with the guidance of the light commissioners, I would want to meet everyone involved in town government. Have them ask me questions, ask them questions to understand not how does it work here? To make sure that I understood my role and my place in it so that I could move forward with that understanding. But that would be basically just the beginning. Beyond meeting people and letting them know I want to be approachable, and I'm sure they would say, let me know anytime if I can help. I think it would also be important in time to reach out to other general managers and to get to know them in the region so that if there were opportunities for us to help each other out, those sort of acquaintances were already made. But I think, again, I'm very flexible, adaptable, and would use a lot of guidance from the commissioners to say, here's what I see, here's what I've been doing, give me additional guidance as I ramp up and become comfortable myself. But I would, number one, want to meet everybody.
You said you somewhat met the staff, or at least the crew, when you left the last interview.
Yes.
And you said apparently you must have got out of your car and checked out what they were doing there. So what were your observations? And I'm just curious, what did you say you were doing?
Well, actually, I didn't speak to them personally
Okay.
because I think that would have been a step too far at this point. I don't think it was necessary for them to know who I was, but because we were on a state highway and because it was a work zone, I wanted to stop briefly, not get out of my car, and simply make an observation so that if I had something to offer at the interview, or if it were asked, I had something to offer, which I did. And I made two interesting observations without getting in their way or in the way of the police officer that was there directing traffic around the site. One was that I thought the line crew did an admirable job of using all of their personal protective equipment, hard hats, safety glasses, rubber gloves, rubber sleeves. I thought the condition and the visibility of the two bucket trucks was commendable. They were sparkling clean. They represented a very good representation of the light plant because it said we're out here doing something, and it looked just neat, very neat. In other words, not sloppy in any way. That was impressive. Not necessarily because I happen to know what they were doing, but because it just was a very strong and positive appearance. I thought that was commendable. However, I did have one safety concern that I had pointed out, and that was that I thought the placement of the cones around the two vehicles might have been a little tight in terms of defining the work zone because it was a state highway. It was 133, not a town side road. And I also had a concern, and I'm not sure yet how we'd solve it, but I had a concern because the police officer that was assigned to the detail at the time I drove by happened to be standing very close to directly under the buckets where the men were working. And as such, had they dropped anything, I thought it was an interesting observation that the linemen, due to regulations, had their hard hats on, but the police officer below them did not. So I was, just concerned from an observational point of view, and it clearly got me thinking that it isn't that often we think about that, despite how many times we need to have a police detail on a busy road. And yet, there might be a way to solve that problem someday by having a hard hat made available by the crew if the police officer needed to stand in a certain place, or perhaps have a hard hat someday that had a police insignia on it so that he didn't lose his visibility as an officer.
So, if you were the general manager and you did see that, what would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do would be to park in a safe place and get my hard hat on and PPE on, and approach the police officer and make sure, if I didn't know who it was, if they didn't know who I was, introduce myself and express my concern, and see if there is a way of him stepping into a different place to do his job so that he was safe, And then perhaps in the long term, talking with light commissioners about that and seeing if there was something we could do.
And would you talk to the police chief?
With their guidance, yes, I would say, what's the right way to approach this? Absolutely. I would feel I could, but again, being new to the town, I might want to ask guidance.
You've had an impressive career, long career at Grid. You've had progressively increasing responsibility. They've supported your education. They compensate you well. So the question obviously is, why is Raleigh the next logical step for your career? What is it about this that Raleigh has to offer that you can't get at Grid today and tomorrow? And then, if in fact Raleigh is the next logical step for you, what kind of commitment are you prepared to make to the town?
I think Raleigh makes sense because it is something that I would say I feel I can deal with. It is not so far a reach in terms of the scope of the position that I think that I would feel uncomfortable presenting myself as a candidate, number one. Number two, our personal and family situation is one in which my 3 sons are all graduated from college, all out, and my wife and I are looking at where will we be relocating because of that. So there are several drivers that are tending to come together at this time. And I also find that Raleigh, from my background in it, the fact our favorite beach is in Ipswich, the fact I had a classmate at college with the name Keeler, whose family was very involved in town, have me a little more familiar with Raleigh than perhaps another candidate. And I do think the job would be very doable, albeit with the guidance of the commissioners. And it's more a case of saying, if we are going to relocate, would an opportunity such as this also facilitate relocation in time?
So are you looking at this as a lifestyle change, or is getting into municipal light something that you've always wanted?
Well, it's always intrigued me. If you think about the fact that I've been a customer of a municipal myself for 20 years, so I've had a little bit of insight into how that works and how their light board works. Because they're very transparent. They have newsletters that come in the bills and things like that. But if you think about the situation in Massachusetts and New England, there are so many municipals around that are sort of interspersed with the private utilities that I can't help but think that my career has very much not encompassed that. And I found that there has been many people with private utility experience that have gone into the municipal light plants and had a very positive experience as well. Many friends of mine at my employer currently work in other municipals and have highly recommended it.
So there are a number of municipal light boards, light departments.
Yes.
Many of them have been looking for general managers. Why Raleigh?
It's a coastal environment. It's one of the things that, as my wife and I talk about our future, it's something that either down the road, someday in retirement, or along the way at this point, might work out very nicely for us, because the thing I haven't told you is that she grew up in a coastal environment, and it's something we might very well want to try to get to in time.
And what kind of commitment are you prepared to make to the town?
I would want to hear back in the short term of your continued interest. With that, I think I would then have to make a very interesting decision to make a change. But I do hope I've convinced you that I'm capable of that change. The hard part would be more personal and family than anything else.
So, with that said, we've been asking you in the 2 rounds of interviews that you've gone through, really questions focusing whether you're a fit for Raleigh. What do you need to make Raleigh a fit for you? Beyond the fact that we'll accept the fact that we're a coastal community, what is it about what you're looking for this step in your career to, and what is it about Raleigh that would make it so that you'd say, yeah, that's where I want to work. That's where I want to spend the next 5-6 years of my career.
I think Raleigh is attractive from what I've seen. This is obviously my first opportunity to meet two of the commissioners, but I think for many other questions you might have for me, it will help me to assess my fit as well as you're assessing that same thing. And I think the size and scope of it makes it seem quite doable despite the fact, and I really don't think this should be a hidden thing, there are many challenges ahead for utilities, not just private, but the munis, such as what to do about smart grid, what to do about, it's okay today, the light plant has a very good policy on the web. If an individual homeowner wants to install solar and how we'll put the meter on, and at that scale, it's a whole new ballgame when a larger customer in town or a large town building then wants to do self-generation. It doesn't matter what type it is. The fact that the generation could be here or there, not necessarily planned by the utility, that's going to make the future very interesting. So I think there are challenges on the technical side that may not have been there before. And there are challenges on the business side in terms of understanding and structuring the power contracts so that the town has the flexibility to go outside and get some additional generation, such as the wind farm in Maine, or the ability to self-generate in town, lessening the involvement of your suppliers and having the flexibility to still do that in an economic way. I would find those to be very interesting challenges.
You use two terms frequently, one doable and the other interesting. And you characterize Raleigh as doable. What does that mean?
I think because of its size, I
Doable
might,
means you can do the job?
I could do a job very comfortably, especially at this scale. Clearly, there are munis such as Shrewsbury, for example, where I live, where the municipal light, I'll say plant, does electric, cable, telephone, and internet. That is a far more complex operation. Even though it's all on one bill, it's a far more complex operation technically and financially than perhaps a light plant with sole electric service. So I think for its scope, I consider it doable, and I think I could speak with some confidence that I could do such an operation to the satisfaction of the light board. But not necessarily.
If I accept the fact, or if this board
Yeah.
accepts the fact that with your experience, managing Raleigh is doable, but the question I had posed this initially on about is what's going to satisfy you. Are you looking for a next step position that's doable, or a next step position that's challenging, that will stretch you? Are you looking for a comfortable role, or are you looking for a position that will really make you do a little bit more, a little bit stretched, a little harder? I don't know. What is it that you're looking for in your next position?
I think your question described it well. The current state, with all the work that has been done up to this point in town, coupled with the challenges of the future, in my mind would make such a position here doable with my background and experience, but challenging because we don't know where these things are going to go. We don't yet know how they might be paid for, whether the state will get involved with legislation for the munis, whether the munis will cooperatively get together, how all this is going to play out in terms of some of the technical challenges of distributed generation as well as smart grid. I mean, smart grid, I believe, for all utilities, is only a matter of time. It's just a case of how they get there. And I can't help but think that much like private utilities collaborate and say, what are you thinking of doing? So must the munis. It should not necessarily be something that is arrived at town by town. There should be a degree of collaboration, particularly within Massachusetts, that the municipals and the managers could bring to their light boards and say, here's what I'm finding out, here's what this or that muni has found by forging ahead, here's some things they would do differently next time, so that when it is the right time here, we're doing that together but we're doing it from a better knowledge base than sitting here alone and saying, let's figure this out. I consider things like that to be quite challenging because they're new and they're different, and we're all going to have to learn.
Gentlemen, you have questions?
No, I don't have any questions. No, he's answered most of my questions.
I asked the other gentleman this question, so it'd be fair to ask you the same thing. Power supply is about 75% of our expense and the largest influence on our rates. What has been your experience in purchasing power?
I have no direct experience in purchasing power. I do have experience and some knowledge of ISO, the transmission system, the sub-transmission system, the 23 kV lines that serve Raleigh and Ipswich. And I think my business and financial knowledge with a degree of training could easily master a knowledge of the contracts currently in place, and with the guidance of the Light Board would enable me to work with you to structure the future ones, given the various challenges I've cited. I believe the contracts may need to be different in the future to encompass all of these different changes that we're going to see.
How many years you plan on working?
I have no defined retirement date, strictly because I feel healthy and I have every interest in working for quite a while. I would say at least 5, maybe 10 years. Right now I see no need to retire. It's too much fun. It's too interesting. There's so much going on in this utility world.
Always helps to keep doing something, don't keep that mind running.
I think so.
Can I follow up on a question you asked, Dave?
Sure.
In terms of, he asked you about the power source, and you don't have any direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you develop the skill set? I mean, your business experience allows you to understand the existing contracts,
Yep.
but you're still going to have to go out and buy the power.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're still going to have to develop the relationships with an MWAC or whomever,
Right.
which they don't have at this point.
Right.
What's the process you develop to understand what you need to do and then develop the necessary skills to be able to go out and say, to make an informed decision so you can form the board, I think we should do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would first master the current contract
Sure.
and seek out all sources of advice and guidance so that I totally mastered and understood it. Then I would use my network. I would use the network I would want to develop of other general managers. I would want to try to find out and get a look at other contracts that are being negotiated or put in place by other munis, or what they could tell me about them in terms of how other light plants have chosen to meet some of these challenges as they emerge. From that, I would then want to come to the Light Board and discuss the extent to which we would need the advice of consultants to bring us some of that same information beyond what I could find out. And then, at that point, I would want to make some recommendations and make sure we agreed in terms of what our approach should be.
Thank you.
In one way, I think it's dangerous to think you're the expert because it makes you maybe a little overreaching. I think a more humble approach is probably in order. It has served me well through the years where I think I know what I don't know and respect that.
Dave.
And what role do you think the board should take in running the light department?
I think heavy guidance and advisory. The balance that I would see is that you're looking for someone with a certain amount of background, experience, and a set of values, such as safety, such as maintaining a reliable system, customer focus, transparency, those sort of characteristics we've talked about. But I also believe that you know best what and could give you the best advice on what strategies are right for Raleigh, as we might talk together about them and about alternative strategies that I might offer to you. But you are best equipped to say and hopefully guide what Raleigh future strategy should be and have a degree of confidence that I could execute that properly.
I guess we can get into money. What range?
Well, my benchmarking, there obviously are benchmarks out there for these positions that generally are focused on either revenue or customer number. And those, I'll say benchmarks, for this size of an operation generally range for the managers from 95,000 to maybe 10,000 more. There also is a sensitivity. I know it's a highly valued thing where I currently work, that a superior should not be paid less than their reports. So that's something that obviously would be of concern to me. But other than that, I think when you combine that with the fact that my wife and I want to relocate, and you combine that with the fact that my years of service at Grid would come with some benefits that I might avail myself of, simply from my term of service, that might provide for some interesting discussions about the level of benefits I might need, coupled with compensation in that range.
Are you looking for like a certain number of year contract or anything?
I would want to first feel what the board's preference is based on your history and what you feel has worked well, or what you feel would work well in the future. Certainly, I would be more comfortable knowing there was a certain commitment, if you were.
I'm all set.
Green energy.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing almost a rush, I guess, of solar, given the credits and so forth, and
Yeah.
time running out, and private industry out there pushing it like crazy, realizing they can't work with Grid, so they're looking at us.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any experience with that? Do you
We
feel comfortable maybe working with that type of a situation?
I think so, and I'll tell you why. I have watched my neighbor municipals do such things. Although I haven't personally participated, of course. I'm not a customer of all theirs. But Shrewsbury, for example, has a green energy option where they have something in their contract that a certain amount of ratepayers in town can avail themselves of a slightly higher cost energy that's 100% green. The town of Princeton has recently put up 2 new windmills, retiring their old ones at a higher height on Wachusett Mountain that they claim, because of the updrafts going up the mountain, will in good times generate up to 40% of their needs. Well, I find that very interesting. I'd love to see their power contract to make sure that that degree of green that could come and go is accommodated by their power contract efficiently, I'll say, at the same time. West Boylston, next to Shrewsbury, recently installed a small solar array on land that was appropriate for that purpose, and that project seemed to go very well. And, of course, Raleigh already has their involvement. It brings up a lot of concern, not just about green or the fact that people want this, but how we're going to do it. Because green is good, but not necessarily everyone in town is also feeling it should be in town. So in my mind, one of the things I would want to have dialogue with the board is, how do you feel about the environment in town? Do people feel strongly enough about green and its benefits and its subsidies, frankly, that they want to see it, they want to drive by it, and they want to sort of proudly see that's ours, that power is ours and it's staying here? Or is the sentiment more, I love it, but not on the town common? Okay, so I think in any sort of discussion, there are financial issues, there are technical issues of how to integrate it, and there are political issues of what do we think will work and yet meet the ratepayers, I'll say, want for green power. And those things, again, I think will be very challenging for all communities. And Bob is very correct when he says it's rushing, because in particular, as the cost of the individual solar panels come down, there are many people going around. One of my employees recently got a solar array on their roof that they are renting, not owning, and they're claiming that they're going to cut their power bill in half. So again, there will be technical challenges if a large one has to go in that a customer wants to put in. Those are more and more common. And on the roof of the building where I currently work, there is a 1 megawatt solar array that I didn't put in personally, but I had to somehow help facilitate on my roof in the last year. And that has been reasonably successful in terms of its desired output. So I think I'm comfortable with it, but comfort isn't just me as a person. I think comfort is something that is also at the town level in terms of how should Rowley incorporate more green. And for that, again, I would rely heavily on your guidance.
Okay.
Do you have any questions of us?
I have a few,
Okay.
if there's time.
Well, there's plenty of time.
How often does the light board meet?
Typically once a month, or
Mhm.
if needed.
Okay. And I would assume those meetings would be formed similar to this? Mutual discussion about how we're doing, our goals,
Yes.
reporting?
Yeah, I'd be basically meeting with the manager.
Yep.
With generally the manager would put the agenda together,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what was needed to be talked about.
Yep.
If something that the commission wanted to bring up, it would be asked to be put on the agenda by the commission.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, if people want to talk to us, then there'd be appointments made
Sure.
for that type of thing.
And I think from this forum in particular, you can best gauge, because I think it is a similar forum in that sense, what your comfort with me, my personality, my background and experience would be. You can best assess the transition that I know Rick has been bringing up, because there is one there. But I think I would feel very comfortable arriving at a balance with the light commissioners over time, once you became comfortable with my knowledge of the operation overall, with what sort of things do you feel I am best empowered to execute day by day, and know that, and what sort of things are necessary and appropriate to be brought to the board for our general discussions. That to me would be the most important understanding to have in place, so that I am using my experience in the most effective and desired way. And that would be one of the first things I'd want to make sure I understand.
Okay.
Other questions?
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
I have one more.
Sure.
Probably more than one, but at least one more.
Keep
Sure.
it going, keep it going, Rick, keep it going.
If you were to be offered the position, what is your availability?
Considering it's September and some of the things I'm involved in right now, the earliest would be October 1, more likely November 1. I had extended labor discussions today with one of our major projects that does involve some discussions with unions. We are about to implement a new financial software application in the company. We are 3 weeks away from that, so there's a lot of intense focus on that. I wouldn't feel right otherwise.
So you're thinking no sooner than October 1, but preferably November 1.
Yes.
All right. And how much notice were you planning on giving your current employers? A month?
I would prefer giving a month.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fair enough.
I think that's also fair to them.
All right. And are there, I guess, is there anything else we need to know about you? Because tonight, likely the commissioners may make a decision. I mean, we haven't seen all the candidates, so anything else they need to know about you to help make their final decision?
It's simply that I think the resume tells the story. It's extensive, but it's broad. And I think it shows with some degree of credibility that I have been able to make transitions of various types throughout my career in not only different types of work, but in different sizes of reports, from being an individual contributor to one in which I have many people working for me and intermediate supervisors. But I think it's important these days to be flexible. I had some very good bosses that told me that years ago, and I listened to them and made sure that I tried to be adaptable and flexible to the future and what it brings. And I just think that that sort of experience is very appropriate to a municipal light plant now, and will be even more critical in the future with some of the challenges we've talked about.
And the last question is, when you were in San Francisco, did you get any Ghirardelli chocolate?
We did.
All right.
With your recommendation.
Okay,
We did.
then you listened to
It
me
was-
and it was a good decision.
It was 2 blocks down from where we stayed.
Dan, what's the approximate commute time to here from where you live?
I've done it in an hour.
Is that a problem?
Not in the short term. I think, as I said, we're going to relocate in time anyway. The complication, of course, is where will my wife work? That will be a major factor that would hopefully make it workable for both of us.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time, your questions. Thank you,
I'll
sir.
walk you out.
Okay,
Thank you. Nice meeting
my
you.
pleasure. Bob, good
Thank
to
you,
see you again.
Yes.
Sir,
Dan,
thank you. Pleased to meet you.
I think the other guy's here too.
You see, that's good.
Truck just pulled up, pickup.
I hate to go into recess.
All right, I will be back to you hopefully this week.
Okay.
All right, thank you. If you have any questions, give me a call.
Thank you.
Safe drive. Are we in recess?
No, actually, I think Dan might be here.
Oh, he might be, I don't know.
I think Eric saw him coming in.
Wouldn't be fair.
That's right.
The way I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, coming in.
Supposed to wave. Send them.
How you doing? Good, how are you? Oh, well. How was your weekend? It was, good. Good? You had a good vacation? I had a good vacation. You want some water before you go? Come on in. Everybody's been on vacation.
Everybody's been on vacation?
Have a hot seat.
Oh, right in front.
Right.
Gentlemen,
How you doing? Dave Lebeck. How are you?
Dan Folding, Bob, we've met.
and Ken Keys. I don't know yet.
Good to meet you. How you doing, Eric? Not bad.
Dan just came back from vacation. Seems like everybody's taking vacations.
It's that time of the year.
So he's rested and able. Dan, we want to take about an hour to get to know you a little bit. We've had an opportunity, Bob and I have had an opportunity to meet with you. The other two gentlemen have not, Dave and Ken, so they want to get to know a little bit about you. So take a few minutes, if you could, to tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the things you've done. We want to know a lot about your career.
My career started in Sterling, Mass. in 1987 as a meter reader. Before that, it's mishmash of different jobs, different things, mechanical stuff, and basically the type of jobs that people have when they're younger. So I started in Sterling in 87 as a meter reader / groundman. So I worked as a meter reader, reading the meters, and then as the line crew needed help, I worked with them on pole setting and, nothing in the bucket, but pole setting, groundman, helping the guys out whenever I could.
Worked there for a year and a half. Was getting married to a girl who lived in Kingston, New Hampshire, so I had to relocate, so I was looking for a job somewhere else. Merrimack, there was an opportunity there for a lineman, for a groundman. So I applied for that job and got that job, and started there in 1988. Started there as a lineman, but as everybody knows, in a small municipality, it's a lineman, substation guy, meter reader, whatever the job needs is what you do on that day. So worked there, progressed through the NEPA lineman training program for 4 years. At the end of the 4 years, I was promoted to first class lineman, and from then, worked as a first class lineman and worked in substations, and whatever the job entailed is what we did on a daily basis. In 2004, the manager then was moving on, so the job came open, and I decided to apply for the job, and I got the job in January 2005, and I've been doing the manager's job since then. Since becoming manager, we've done a few things in Merrimack that I thought have improved the system, not only continuing what was started when the previous manager was there. System upgrades, new Hendrix wire, new poles. Systems get old, they need repairing, so we were constantly working on repairing systems. Not long after that, I did some office improvements, improved the bill format. Went from a postcard bill to a full 8.5 by 11 bill, which gave the customers a lot more information. Actually, it was cheaper to do it that way than the postcard bill. Shortly after that, we decided to, we had a contract meter reader who was in and out. We had 3 or 4 of them probably in a 5-year span. So we decided that it was time to do something a little different with the metering. So we went to AMI metering system, which is an Elster system. Basically what that is for those of you who don't know metering, it's basically a system that communicates two-way with the meters from a server in the office, which works very well. So the meter position was, since it was a contract, there wasn't really a full-time employee anyway, so we managed that very well. We actually had the system up and running, fully deployed within a year. Started that in 2007 and 2008. We were actually reading the meters from the server in the office every day. So that worked very well. Shortly after that, we had some large growth in Merrimack, mostly housing. Nothing really, no commercial developments, but just housing developments. So our system peak was increasing, and our substation was basically getting to the point where it needed to be upgraded. So, working with an engineer, we went out to bid to rebuild the substation that we had built. And I kind of skipped that part. I'll go back to when I started. We had rebuilt built the substation from scratch, from the foundation up. As a lineman just starting there, there was no 13.8, and that's where the 13.8 started. We built the substation shortly after I got there. But shortly after, becoming a manager, that substation that we built in '88 has since started to reach its maximum capacity, so we needed to upgrade the substation. So basically, built a temporary substation next to it, decommissioned the old substation, get rid of the old equipment, the transformers, redid some steel work, redid all the aluminum, the copper tubing in the substation, refitted it with new transformers, new regulators, new reclosers. Basically, at the end, we had a brand new substation, which is capable of. The original substation was probably 7 megawatts. This one is 20. It's in peak capacity, so it's going to be good for Merrimack for the next 20 years. It's something that you wanted to take, that you want to make sure it lasts. Especially if you're going to incur debt for it, you want to make it last for as long as possible. Along with that, just major purchases, line trucks, different bidding things that we go out for. Purchase power contracts. When I first started there, we used to have similar to Raleigh, we had a 10-year contract that was at a very low rate, and that ran out in 2008, so we had to go through power supply. And power supply is a very important issue in today's world. It's probably 80 to 90% of your budget. I'm not sure what Raleigh's budget is. It's probably $7 or $8 million, but power supply is probably 5 or 6 million of that money goes to your power supply, which is a huge cost for any municipality. So we worked with a consultant to go out for a new power supply contract, which is, in the days of, what used to be 10-year contracts. Now you can't get 10-year contracts anymore. You got to go out for 4-year contracts. There's nothing long-term anymore. So we negotiated that process, came to a good agreement with a power supply provider, signed a contract, and shortly after that, next couple of years, we signed another power supply contract with another power supply provider. So that's got a good education on power supply, just starting from scratch and right through the whole process, and just basically dealing with the office issues, dealing with billing software upgrades. When I first got there as manager, we were using a NDS system that was, I don't want to say it was DOS based, but it was similar to that, and upgraded the server to a Windows based, similar to what Raleigh has now. I think we're on the same version as what Raleigh has now as far as the billing system. And that's kind of my story, is where we're at right now.
You've been here many times. You know the staff. You know Eric. So it's easy for you to do your homework on what's going on here in Raleigh. So what can you tell us about what you know about Raleigh? What kind of observations have you made about this community and the light plant? And so what can you offer us as the next general manager?
I know Raleigh, on the power supply side of it, was going through the same process, as concurrently with Merrimack and Groveland as well. Our contracts, and that's a very close relationship from the three municipalities. Back when the contracts were first started or first signed, I believe all three municipalities signed, I think at the same time, even the same meeting. So when the contracts were up, we did the same process again. It was the three managers with consultants and lawyers going through that same process over again. So I have a very good idea of that end of it, of the power supply Raleigh has.
Sure.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
On power supply, how is Raleigh doing with renewable energy? Is it something that you've considered, or something that you're going to approach at a...
We've got some people knocking on the door, solar in particular. Still at this point struggling with it a little bit, trying to get the agreement and our requirements together. That hadn't been done as of this past year. So we're still working on that part of it, try to get it set up. We've got at least one, possibly two, fairly large megawatt plus inquiries at this point and that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with in the coming years or so.
In Merrimack, we started working basically the same process with a consultant, trying to get a 1.5 megawatt project built in Merrimack on town-owned land. And the reason we wanted to do town-owned land is because it kind of shortens the process up.
At this point, we're dealing with private land. It's a private company that's come in out of California that's around here. We did look into a little bit. There isn't many spots in Raleigh that's town-owned, that's large enough to do that kind of thing. One of the issues that came up, and one of the suggestions that came up through Merrimack Valley Planning, was the landfill sites. And Merrimack Valley did a study on that. We came in about midway, and most of them didn't make out all that great with it. We don't really, our landfill is really not that large, and it is kind of an odd shape, and then it's fairly tall. So the area that we have to work with is not conducive to a larger solar system.
Yeah, okay. The larger arrays, I'm not sure what size you're talking about, 2 megawatts or so?
Well, it's 1 plus.
1 plus,
Yeah.
yeah. You figure that most arrays, megawatt, is about 5 acres of land, and that's really kind of tight, so you probably need at least probably 10 to 15 acres to do with like a 2 megawatt
Yeah,
project,
yeah.
and that is sometimes difficult to find.
Yeah, and the landfill site that's suitable for it really isn't quite that big,
Mhm.
so.
We were lucky in the respect that we have the town-owned land, which is a well field. So we're negotiating with the selectmen, and I've approached all the planning board, the zoning board in town. We have good relationships with the chairmans of those boards. So approach those boards. I approach them personally on the phone and in person, and talk to them about that just to get the process rolling and make sure everybody's on the same page. So it seems to be progressing pretty well.
Mhm.
It's just trying to get all the movement through town meeting and you know, establishing all those contacts. But it seems to be moving along pretty well. Has Raleigh decided to? If I'm getting off track, please throw me back
We'll
on
let you
track.
continue, and I'll bring you back, I assure
Okay.
you.
Raleigh, have you looked into contracts with hydro dams or wind projects or?
We've got some in Spruce Mountain.
Okay.
We were looking, you guys probably were too, at Lee Energia,
Yep.
and that kind of fell through for some reason. I don't know exactly why, but.
Yeah, Lenergia. When it was going to be sold, they kind of wanted a little bit more for it than was willing to pay, and then the gas market dropped out, so then it made it kind of unfeasible for us to
Yeah.
continue with the
Yeah.
process. I think
So-
that's the same way Raleigh. But we have a portion of Spruce Mountain Wind and Miller Hydro, which is good. It's
I think
renewable.
we picked up some Miller too, didn't we, Eric? Yeah, we picked up some Miller.
Okay.
But those are small compared to what's look like it's in the pipeline at this point.
Yeah, they're small, but they're a part of your portfolio
Oh,
that I think
absolutely.
needs to be there if the price is
Absolutely.
right for those
Yeah.
projects. So it definitely helps, especially like Spruce Mountain is long term.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We definitely need to look at some of those, but I'm a little bit concerned about the larger ones coming in, what it's gonna do to our mix and our demands. So, if it starts knocking off our demand, we may have some problems with contracted demand that we have, and then you bring this other stuff in.
Hmm.
It kind of offsets it, which we're now paying for the contracted demand.
I know when Raleigh signed their power supply contract, they signed one that was very similar to Merrimack's as a 60% of load following, which means no matter what you use, you're only going to buy 60% of your load. So it doesn't. You can sign purchase power agreements with small solar or even 1 megawatt solar.
Mm-hmm.
It comes off your top. I mean, it brings your demand down, but it doesn't really affect your contract in that respect because you're only going to pay for 60% regardless. Even if your load, if you have 2 megawatts off the top and you're an 11 megawatt load, you only have 9, so you take 60%, and that's basically what you pay for. So that's what's nice about a load following contract.
Yeah, that's something fairly new within the last couple of years, right?
I think they've been around a while, but it's something that, I think Raleigh and Merrimack Grove and all the ones that had those long-term deals, we weren't exposed to those in years past. I think they've been around a little bit, but we weren't exposed to it. And, it's just something that makes sense to me, especially for a smaller system. You fix your price and then you have a certain percentage of your load that's very easy to manage. It gives you a good target for your budget on a yearly basis, say, well, 60% of it's covered at 6 cents. So you can budget, and it makes it easy that way.
Yeah.
But, so I've been through, a lot of power supply deals with different contractors, different consultants. We work closely with Energy New England, Rubin and Rubman. We use them for lawyers for the power contracts. Just lost my train of thought.
It's
I
okay.
hate when that happens.
Let him jump in now.
Let
Take
me-
it off you.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me ask you, you've worked with the staff of Raleigh?
I've worked with the manager in past. I worked with when we did mutual aid for the ice storm.
Mhm.
The line crew came over. I worked closely with them during that time.
Tell us about that.
I think Raleigh's got a very good crew. I think they performed very well during the ice storm in the mutual aid part of it. I was their person to take them around to show them where to go. they could, I could tell, basically dealing with Mark, the superintendent, to basically, this is the section of town we want to do, and he would do it all, report back to me, and we worked well together, and I liked the way they worked. They did a good job, and they did what they were supposed to do, and it worked well. You have a good crew that communicates very well.
Good. Well, let me ask some other questions if I can. When we were developing the profile of the ideal manager, the profile really looked at, we wanted somebody with good technical skills and strong management and business experience. Tell us how you match up with that profile and give us some specific examples.
The operational experience, working for Merrimack for 25 years, dealing with all the issues that come up, pole line construction, meter replacements, large meter installations. I'm trying to think of the right term. Substations, working with engineers, putting the substation out to bid. During construction, handling different things that may come up during the construction phase, problems, working with the vendors, getting the vendors signed off on their different parts of their contract. Management experience, working after I became manager, working in the office, learning the computer system, the way it is, the billing system, and seeing as they are the same billing system gives me a good idea or a good understanding of what's involved in the computer system. Working with the integration of the Elster metering system into the billing system to actually, when the system reads, it brings down a reading file, which we just merge into the billing system, and it just seamlessly prints, all that information is applied to customer accounts, and then the bills are printed shortly after that. So that's to me is good because it's the same billing system as Merrimack is, in the same version. I believe it's pretty close to the same version. Working with linemen, superintendent, my foreman, good relationship with the crew on a daily basis. I understand their issues. I understand if they come in and tell me they have work to do on a certain street, it involves this, and this. I understand where they're coming from, what they want to do. I can try and give them valuable input, my input on my years of experience, trying to talk to them about a job. We can discuss I have good communication skills, talking to linemen, talking to the superintendent, and we can talk on the same level. I think that is part of the qualifications that make me good for this job.
When we last met, we talked a little bit about transparency and the importance of transparency in the role of a general manager.
Mm-hmm.
How would you define transparency? What does it mean to you, and how can you ensure that it exists at Merrimack, and how would you ensure that it would exist here at Raleigh?
I think communication between the board, the manager, and the employees is part of transparency, because when everybody understands, and that kind of brings up another question I'll ask in a minute. If everybody communicates, what you do on a daily basis is transparent to all the employees, and it starts with the board, the manager, and then filters down to the employees. If everybody's transparent, communicates well, everybody understands what the mission, and that's another mission statement. Does Rowley have a mission statement, or is it something that we were looking to?
Yeah, there is a mission. It's actually on our website.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. I did look at it, but I don't remember exactly what it said, so
Well, I can't tell you either, so.
so-
I do know there's one there.
But that if it hasn't been updated, I said recently, I think that should be something that we, look at as a mission statement for the employees, for everybody to buy into in the whole organization. The mission statement is very important, and it gives everybody the goal to work towards, from the board right down to all the employees. So I think that's transparency is in the organization is communication amongst all the employees and talking about problems, issues that they may have. Outside the organization is working well with the selectmen, with all the different boards in town, the planning board, the zoning board, and understanding their roles. And as long as they understand where they're coming from, I think that's part of the transparency as well.
And have you been able to, or what is the level of transparency that you experience at Merrimack?
I communicate very well with the board at a board level and at an individual level with the different selectmen. I have good personal relationships with the zoning board chairman, the planning board chairman, with the planning board secretary, the zoning board secretary. Issues that may come up with different developments coming into town, planning, going to the meetings as far as the zoning or the planning board meetings, so that they understand and I understand, what this project is all about. They understand our expectations as the light department goes, and we understand their expectations as a board. I think, that's part of transparency is basically talking to these different boards and getting out and meeting with them, and especially on a per project basis.
So there's heavy involvement, it sounds like, that you have with your commissioners, with your staff, and with the other departments in the town and town government.
Mm-hmm.
What other things are you doing with other departments within Merrimack?
Good example of that is we have a drive-up window in Merrimack, which is an oddity as far as municipal light departments go, but we have a drive-up window.
That's what happens when you take over an old bank.
Yeah, exactly. But the drive-up window was an accident. It was broken. The drawer caught on a truck and it needed to be fixed. Well, it's not something that we are very good at. The curbing needed to move in, so basically I called the highway foreman. We talked with him. He came over. We looked at the job. He brought his crew over. We worked on moving the curbing in. So we work with the highway foreman then. Trees in town, we work seamlessly with the highway department. If a tree needs to come down and it's something that we can do, we do it. The highway guys are there with us, chipping the brush, working with us. During ice storms or even regular windstorms, we work with the highway department. They would follow behind us, clearing trees that we had dropped or limbs that we dropped to the ground. They would clean them up afterwards. Sewer department, we worked well with them before. We have lifted pumps out of deep holes for them with our digger truck. Water department, we used to be light and water, so that basically speaks for itself. We did a lot for the water department. That we used to be housed in the same building, so we did work well together. The employees worked
Are you
well.
a department within the town, or are you separate? And how does that work?
Now you get into the tough questions. The light department is a department within the town. When the town has department head meetings, all the department heads go, including myself. They have, on a monthly basis, not during the summer, but they have department head meetings, the fire chief, the police chief, treasurer, accountant, myself, all the department heads go to those meetings, and that's a good communication tool for me to get, because we have a little general talk about what's going on in each individual department, and we communicate that way.
As you look at Rowley, why is it your next logical step in your career? And really, what kind of commitment are you prepared to make to us?
Rowley is a larger system. To me, that brings on more challenges that I don't have in Merrimack. It is 40% commercial base, which Merrimack is maybe 5% commercial base, so that brings on new challenges. I understand from your website that you do have, you supply conservation services to those businesses on a case-by-case basis, so that's interesting. That's not something we do in Merrimack. So that brings a new opportunity for me to reach out to businesses. Newsletters, I believe strongly in newsletters with communication with the customers and the businesses. As far as the commitment to Raleigh, I know I have not finished my degree. I plan on finishing my degree. That would be a commitment I would make to Raleigh, to finish my degree within the next couple of years and get that done. That make sure I get the more experience from the business classes. I've already made a significant commitment in those classes. I am 2/3 of the way done with those classes. So that would be one of the commitments I would make. I'm not sure. The question is a little hard for me to reference as far as exactly what you're looking for on a commitment part of it, but
I think it's duration.
duration. I am right now. I don't know if you want to go over age or if it doesn't matter.
I don't want to go over age. I just
Yeah.
want to know how long you want to stay.
Oh, I'd stay as long as you want me. I mean, I can't commit. I mean, I have 25 years in the business now. So I mean, basically, it's
So this isn't a stop along the way.
no.
Fair
I'd
enough.
say that. Well, this would be the final stop along the way.
Okay.
What are we talking, like 10 years, something like that, or more?
More could be, yeah. I mean, I can't. That's a hard question to commit to as far as a time frame. To say 10, I'd be there definitely for 10 years. I don't know.
That would be the minimum, say. Okay.
Well, let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
We've been asking you a lot of questions.
Yep.
Focusing on whether you're a fit for Raleigh. What do you need to make Raleigh a fit for you?
A board that communicates well with the manager and works well with the manager. A board that commits themselves to the organization, that establishes policies and that benefit the ratepayers of the town of Raleigh, benefits the employees of the light department. That's one of the things that I've seen in different municipalities is when the board doesn't communicate well with the employees or the ratepayers, it tends to destroy the organization. I think that's part of the commitment I would ask from the commissioners is communication with the manager on every basis, and communication as far as, I don't know how you communicate now, whether it be phone, by email, or individual communication, phone call a day or an email a day, or to make everybody aware what is going on in the system. Make me aware of what your issues are as far as the board goes, and we can address those and nothing hurts an organization like ideas that tend to build up over time and basically ruin the organization.
Gentlemen?
In reading your application, the reason you were leaving is because of the salary. They clamped down on your salary. What would prevent us doing the same thing in the future? And how would you feel about that?
There would be nothing really. No, I mean,
Is that really the reason, one of the reasons you would like to leave?
well, I'm going to be honest. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons I have to supply. I mean, I have 2 sons in college. My wife is in college as well. I have things I have to pay for as college goes. So definitely money is an issue. Is it the only reason? No. I think Raleigh has a lot of opportunities for me to expand your renewable portfolio, to expand your solar opportunities, get those going, increase your customer base if you could. I mean, there's different things you can do to.
Yeah. Other than that, that was the only question that he hasn't answered, that you people have asked.
Newton, how far is this from Newton to here?
Probably about 35 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What range are we looking at here? Well, pay?
For pay, did you want to? Okay, well, when I put on my resume, I believe I asked for 110 to 115.
Okay.
How does the board communicate with the manager? And do you basically call every day, or do you email, or just no communication? Or
I just, whenever there was a question, if they called, I mean, I myself prefer the manager running the show. You know, I mean, usually the manager comes up with some recommendations and you talk about it and, you know, help out which way we're gonna go and which way they feel is best. I mean, that's the way I think, I mean.
okay, yeah, that's good. Personal communication is always a
Yeah,
good thing.
that's
Just
anytime,
stopping
I'm
in.
always available,
Yeah. Okay.
you know.
Yeah, typically if the manager had something that wanted to get to the commission, it would probably go by email.
Okay.
The commission itself, as I've only been chairman for a short time, but I would typically email the other two and set up a meeting or whatever was going to be happening. The meeting schedule would be generally established by the manager. As the day-to-day operator, they would have a feel for what needed to be discussed at any particular meeting.
Okay.
And if there was something the commission wanted to talk about, then we would put that on through the manager and go that way.
Okay. All right. That's good to know.
Yeah. My philosophy was let the manager do his job.
Okay.
If there's
All
a
right.
problem, then we talk.
Yeah, I mean, the day-to-day operations generally are the manager's concern, and then, you know, any policies, anything large that comes up is definitely for the commissioners to decide. And I don't believe in, you know, not running things by the commission. Would, you know, a larger thing may come up, policy may come up. Definitely, you know, amongst the board and the commission, amongst myself and the board to talk about that and come up to a solution that, you know, benefits.
Well, it certainly is, from the commission side of the table, it certainly is nice to have the manager talking to you and tell you what's going on. If there's something happening, because typically it gets out at some point, and you run into it at the post office or at the supermarket, and all of a sudden, wait, how come you got a new car? Yeah, okay, what new car? That type of thing is embarrassing, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
As an elected official, you should know that that's going to happen.
That's yeah, definitely a communication thing there. Yeah. Okay.
Other questions?
Fine.
Pretty much hit
The
the
normal questions is already answered, you already answered those.
Do you have any more questions of us?
You know, I was on the way over here. I was thinking, of what can I ask? What can I? And the different questions roll through your mind. It's a lot of little questions that I think can be addressed later on. But in the major questions, I think I've covered pretty much what I need to know from the board.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you coming in tonight.
I appreciate having the opportunity to be here and to look, you know, to go for this job.
Super. Thanks, Will.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you again. Nice to meet you.
I'll walk you out.
Okay. Eric, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Dan.
Not an easy decision.
Well,
No, you got three good candidates there.
To be perfectly honest with you, Ken, it was the 5 that we actually interviewed were all good candidates.
Yeah,
There's a-
Yeah,
the
I
screening-
imagine they were.
The screening committee, it was a kind of a difficult process to even get it down to 3.
yeah.
We did spend quite a bit of time getting to that point. And any one of these will work fine. Okay,
Should I leave it open?
doesn't really matter, nobody's here.
Might be cooler.
And actually, the
I
only
got
one
the air
that'll,
conditioner
the only-
keeps coming on.
that'll
Did you hear
bother
that?
you is Dave.
It keeps coming on with the door shut.
With it shut. I
Yeah.
should keep it shut.
Unless you want it open and run constantly,
No, I-
then you won't hear.
I think it's getting cool enough outside now, so it probably won't run very much. Okay, so we've gone through the interview process, done the 3 candidates that were recommended to us by the screening committee. So agenda item number 6 is to consider applicants for the management position. So,
Well, I guess you have to make a decision at this point in time whether these 3, any of these 3 meet your criteria and whether you're ready to move forward with either 1 or 2 of them in terms of either next steps. Next steps can be, I want to talk some more, or it could be, I want to interview. Or very frankly, it could be that I don't want to hire any of them and we reopen the whole search process.
Do you feel, any of you gentlemen feel you have to interview anybody?
well, I can speak for myself, I can't speak for you two
No,
folks.
that's why I'm asking.
Because this is my second time around
Right,
with
you've
with
had
all
'em.
3 of these.
Right.
So I feel comfortable at this
Okay.
point. But it's up to you guys if you wanna.
I certainly don't.
If you think you need to do that.
I don't think we need to start all over again,
Okay?
No, I think that's,
you know.
I think
just
we,
a matter of
you
deciding.
know, you've had 5 good applicants and now we're down to 3 and I mean, I don't know. This gentleman that just left and the other 2, they're all excellent. This one here, Daniel Volding, he seems like he can almost come right in. Everything is pretty much the same as in Merrimack, so if you want, I'd make a motion that we appoint Daniel Folding to the new manager's position. I'll put that in the motion and see what you do.
Well, there has been a motion made, but I'm not sure that I'm that comfortable with just picking one with a little bit more discussion.
You know, let's
A little more
Fine.
discussion.
have discussion.
You got 2 candidates that are only willing to work for 5 years.
I'm not so sure that's what I heard. What,
No.
Well, one said he didn't know when he would retire. And this last one, not the last one, but he's the youngest one of all that would stay for quite a while.
I suspect that all 3 of those candidates
10 years.
would willing to stay for an extended period of time. I think in today's environment, if you can get a candidate to stay 3 to 5 years, that's positive. I think these 3 candidates, you're going to get at least that, probably more. These are candidates that I don't think you have to worry about that, about. So I think it's safe to say that that the decision you make with these 3 candidates will be based on which one you think is the best fit to do the job. And I don't think duration is anything that you have to be concerned about.
No, I have to agree. I think we do need that. And what I see is kind of a diverse background with these 3 candidates. We've got one of them who's been around for 35 years, retired once, really didn't like the retirement, and I can understand that perfectly,
That's Steve Sokobi.
and wants to get back into it again.
Mhm.
We've got another gentleman who has a vast background, in a much larger company,
Mm-hmm.
that from what I heard from him in both of the interviews is on top of the coming technology.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned smart grid several times. Smart grid is something that's going to be forced upon us, whether we want to do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
He's had some background with it. He understands the equipment. We have another candidate who's running a system pretty much the same size as Rowley. And would probably make a very good manager. Said he'll stay for a while. He thinks he wants to do that. But the salary is a little bit, at least what he's looking for, is a little bit on the high side. So I think my recommendation, if that's what we want to make from an individual member of the board, would be Dan Pryor. I think he's got some background that we're going to be able to make good use of in the coming years, particularly with the green energy portion. We've got an registered electrical engineer in the state of Massachusetts. He's got a business degree. He's done numerous jobs. Whether he's actually been in a bucket truck or not is probably not. But I think he has a good understanding of how that part of the job works. He availed himself of the information when he had to deal with after-hours calls. He wanted to know what was required and what needed to be done. He asked the questions. He claims he knows that type of situation. And I think that's the type of manager that will be valuable to us in the future.
Ken, what do you think?
Huh?
What do you think of these candidates?
I'm not sure. I'm still not sure.
Is there any of those three candidates that you wouldn't want to hire?
No. They all have good sides to them. I was kind of surprised he sidestepped my question. That the reason he was leaving Merrimack was because they put a clamp on his salary. And I said, what happens if we did it? Well, then he just went off on some different tangent, but he didn't answer my question.
Okay. Well, you asked a good question. And economics is important. Economics is important to everyone, but economics is important to him, and that's part of the driver. I mean, I think Bob profiled it, and you all have profiled it well. I mean, you've got to make a decision about who best can fit here, who has the skill set, and then ultimately who you folks can work with, because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. Socobe comes from a system that's in many cases similar in size to Rowley. A difficult system because of the geography and the climate of Maine. And now is spending time as a trainer. Operationally, he's solid. From the managerial end of it, he hasn't the same amount of experience as the other two. But operationally, you're not going to touch him. He's first rate. Be high quality operation. Folding has done it. He's doing it now. Smaller operation, this would be a step up in terms of size. So for him, I think, Dave, to your point, it would be easy transition. He's here. No relocation, no nothing. He's just got to drive a couple of miles different to here. So in that sense, there's some advantages to him. Pryor is fits the exact profile you have given me at the start, with the exception of he's coming from a non-municipal background. He's coming from a big company. The advantage of that is he brings the big company knowledge and experiences. The disadvantage is he's not worked in a small municipal department. But he is the engineer. He's the only engineer of the group. He's the registered engineer. And he's got solid business background and an MBA with that. So from an educational standpoint, he's over the others. So I agree that it's a difficult choice because the candidates bring different facets to them. So ultimately you have to decide of which one fits what you're looking for and which one are you more comfortable working with. From a dollar standpoint, they're relatively close. So it isn't going to be a huge difference, but there is that difference, and you point that out. Incidentally, I think Pryor said he has been up in the bucket, and he's licensed to drive a truck.
Yeah, that's true. We did mention that
He's
before.
licensed for hydraulics.
Yeah.
He's got a CDL. He's got it all.
Forklift license, hydraulic license, he does have that. He did tell us that before. So, I mean, but I see this industry changing,
Yeah.
and changing very rapidly. I mean, I think even if you just go and talk to Mark, he's been struggling with his solar issues that are coming down the road.
Well, we can only put so much in, though. It isn't like we can do a whole bunch of them.
Well, I know, but we need to be able to have the ability to do it. And that's, right now, we don't have that ability. And as a matter of fact, Mark called me today, and he wants me to meet him tomorrow morning at the office to go over this solar stuff.
Yeah.
And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't have a clue.
No, I know. I went in earlier today and we had a discussion on it. And, I mean, you have to go what's recommended. I mean, the town doesn't even have a bylaw for solar yet.
No,
You know, so I don't know.
Well, that's certainly nothing that we can control. I mean,
No, I know, but I don't think we
I
have
can
to
tell
really
you-
rush.
I can tell you personally that I did tell the planning board that these things were being looked at, and to give them a heads up,
Yeah.
so that they could start thinking about it. But one of the key issues we're going to have once we start to do this solar stuff, particularly with the photovoltaics, is what's the compatibility to our system? What's it going to do to our reliability? How do we get it onto the grid and off the grid if we wheel it through? And a registered electrical engineer is going to be able to tell us those questions, answer those questions.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, we've had consultants in the past too. I mean, it's not like you need to hire somebody just because they're an engineer. I mean, this is a whole new field, and I think it's going to take more than one to get the answers. I mean, it's you got to see what other towns are doing. I mean, I think it's kind of more involved than just one engineer just because he's got a degree. I mean, that's just my feeling.
Well, I think the degree is an asset.
Yeah, it is, but, I mean, we've done a good job here in Raleigh all these years without an engineer.
But that's very true.
You've done a darn good job. I mean, it's like Merrimack is just, they did a substation for 20 and we've already got 30 megas. Substation, and you're way ahead of them. So I mean,
but the technology is changing.
Oh, I realize.
And you're
that.
not going to be able to do that with the knowledge that we've had from the past. That's my.
Yeah.
We have to look at the future.
Oh, I agree too. Yeah.
And
I don't think it's all going to be solar and wind power though, because I think when you see this, the government stop giving all the grant money, you're going to see a lot of it come down.
Well, the grant money's going to run out at some point.
Yeah.
But particularly the state of Massachusetts is going to force you to do it no matter what. you'll be kicking and screaming, but they're gonna force you to do it. I mean, they've already made that very clear.
Well, in terms of your two candidates, as it applies to the solar and the changing technology, obviously, having an engineer, having somebody with prior who seems to be grid being on the edge, watching what's going on, he brings that to the table. Folding is living it because he's putting it in right now.
Yeah.
So the two of them have that. Sokobi hasn't had that experience.
Right.
So that's a brand new thing for him. Not that he couldn't learn it, but he'd have to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the business end of it, he needs to learn more of the business end of it. Folding and prior are living the business end of it. Folding from a town, he's doing it, he's the general manager. Prior, he's got multi-million-dollar budgets, so he's done it. Those are your options.
We have to be universal on this.
Well, we have to have a majority.
Well, 2 out of the 3 would do it.
You have to have a majority for a choice, and I'm not going to tell you guys how to make a decision. But the 3 of you are going to have to live it.
No question about that.
So there's got to
yeah.
be consensus
Right.
on that.
There's no question about it. I mean,
But you don't have to have a 3-0 vote. It would be perfect. It would be ideal if you did.
well, I think hiring a new person would probably feel a lot more comfortable if he knew that the 3 commissioners were behind him rather than a divided vote.
Absolutely. Because he would know.
Oh, no question about it. Yeah, that's
Wife's home watching it now.
Could very well be.
Well, I don't know. You want to talk more about it, Bob, or?
Well, I mean, what I'm saying, Dave, is I did that same job. I mean, I can relate perfectly to Steve.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, he and I are hooked at the hip.
Yeah.
We really are, because we came up through the same time frame, basically. I started a little bit earlier than he did,
Mhm.
and retired a little bit earlier than he did, but it was through the same evolution of the industry. I don't know if I could do it today with the technology the way it is.
So it's the change in the technology that you're concerned about whether Steve has the experiences to be able to do that.
To a degree, yes.
To a degree.
Yeah. I think he'd make a great manager. Don't get me wrong there. I think he'd make a great manager. But I'm trying to look ahead at the future.
So if you were looking at a manager for today, if there were going to be no changes, if everything was to stay stable, you would go with Steve.
Actually, what I would have to do at that point, Rick,
Uh-huh.
is flip a coin.
Between
Steve and Dan Folding.
and Dan Folding.
Yeah.
So you see Dan and Steve as somebody that would hold it together without major changes in technology and that.
Right.
Smart grid and things like that changes that whole equation. And if that's the situation, you would go with prior, and you believe that's the situation.
I do.
Okay. Okay, that's fair enough. So using that framework, Dave, do you agree with Bob on that? If it were a stable, non-changing, that would be either a Sokobi or a Folding, and a prior if things are changing, or do you see it differently?
I just see that, I think myself, Daniel Folding is a better fit for Raleigh
Because,
because of the experience he's had as the manager.
okay,
The municipalities, they all work together, they
Mhm.
talk with each other,
Mhm.
they work as a group.
okay,
So, I mean, it's not like one is making a decision. They're all, it's like, different people talking with different people, lawyers talking with this lawyer, it's a team thing, like, it's not one, they're all feeding off of somebody else, what happened here, what happened, what do you know here? You got, people like yourself that come in, you're gonna ask them what they think is special on their particular item or whatever we're dealing with, if it's gonna be solar or this or that.
Gotcha.
So you're getting their expertise on, what they know.
So I think what you're saying is that you see that he's a better fit for Raleigh, in that in those areas where he needs some certain expertise, he could access that in the outside
Yeah.
and still be able to run the operation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just looking over the years of Raleigh, how great it's been, we have a fantastic team.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't ask for a better bunch of people that work for the Raleigh Light Department. You don't hear of any complaints. They know how to work, and this guy seems like he's a good leader too. He's been a lineman, he knows it, So I just think it's a good fit, that whole group.
Okay, if he weren't a candidate, so it was only the other two, would those two be able to fit in, or would you say, if without folding, I'd want to go out and look some more?
No, you could pick from these three.
You could pick.
Yeah, I
So-
think,
So
and
if
like you say, coming down to a couple, they're all good. I mean, it's like anything else. Nobody knows everything. You can always learn something.
Sure.
So, I mean,
Fair enough. I think I got it.
I'm just looking for a nice, smooth,
Smooth transition.
right,
Perfect.
and to get going on it.
Excellent. Okay, Ken. I
think we
guess I'm
didn't
gonna come
ask-
back to you.
I think we didn't ask Folding. If he did come, what's his time schedule? You must have asked that
He
question
had
earlier.
given us a time frame that he could come in October or
Yeah.
November. He was pretty open. He's going to be away the second week of this month because of the NEPA conference. I imagine Steve Jacoby is too, but though I never had that conversation with him. But his time frame is October, November.
I think Steve will be. They generally would include the staff.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think they all could be here October, November. So, Ken, it seems that Bob is looking at it from a perspective of the future, and the change in the technology, the changing in the whole environment of power, he sees Prior as a better fit. Dave sees the fact that Dan Folding can maintain and continue what you're doing, and when there is a need for certain expertise, he'd go to the outside. But could live, either one of both Bob, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, folks, Bob and Dave could live with any of the three candidates. I guess the question then becomes, where are you on this? I'm not asking you to break a tie or anything like that, I'm just wondering, where are you in this process? Are you leaning towards one or another, or what's important to you in the next general manager?
I'm not sure. Dave's got some good points on Folding being an active manager, but I've also been at meetings with him when we had safety meetings, and I didn't like what was going on over there,
Okay?
and I'd hate to see it happen here. I mean, he makes he does do a good job, and but some of the things that happened, the comments that were made, just made me a little nervous.
So there's a reluctance on Folding.
Hmm.
So if that's the case, where are you on Jacoby and Pryor?
Well, Jacoby, I don't think he would. I think, like you say, he would make a good manager if there weren't any changes. He would be good. But it's just a matter of, do we go with what's what could happen down the line?
Well, I think help me out here. Are you saying that Sokobi would be a good manager if things were to stay as they are?
Yeah, which was already said, yeah.
Okay. Is Pryor even in the equation? Is he
Oh,
some-
yeah.
And would you consider Pryor, what would you see as the advantage of Pryor?
The other thing that he was talking a lot about was depending on the commissioners to do part of his job, which we don't
No,
really
actually-
do.
Actually, I didn't,
You didn't feel that?
I didn't interpret it that way, Ken.
No?
What I interpreted when he was talking about the commission was that he wants to work with the commission. He just don't want to run out and do his own thing. He wants to coordinate it with the commission.
Yeah.
And I think part of that would be one of his weaknesses, is that he hasn't dealt with a municipal system that runs on a commission-type
Yeah.
platform. So he would want us as the commission, and if we remember right, we're elected by the townspeople to represent the townspeople, so that he understood how the municipal worked within
How
its
the
community,
commissioners work.
within its community, within its town, with its customers. And it's,
I suspect all three of the candidates, all five of the candidates that we saw, but all three that you saw, folks, were being very deferential to the commissioners, because they're interviewing with the commissioners, and they wanted to make sure the message was clear that I can work and will listen to you folks. However, that being said, and I'm not saying these guys are not going to do that, they have clear opinions on how they would run their operation. So I don't think they would depend on you. I think what they would do is state their case and hope to persuade you about it. But all three of them have told me that they understand 164. They understand who is would I make the final decisions on things, and that would be the commissioners. They're not gonna, none of them are gonna put a stake in the ground and say, my way or the highway.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think what you heard, and I caught the very same thing you did, because I was listening to that and I'm thinking, they consistently said, I'm gonna check with the commissioners, I wanna get the input from the commissioners, and I agree, I don't doubt that they're gonna do that. But I think all three of them are capable of making the decisions and hoping that the commissioners come along.
I think what at least the interpretation I got from him, and you're right, almost every candidate we talked to, even the other two that
Even the other two.
said those same words.
Yeah.
But I think they want to work with the commission.
Yeah.
They understand, and I think Pryor said it the best. The commissioners understand the community. And he wants to understand the community, so he's going to do that through the commissioners.
Yeah. He understands the politics, and he understands the community, and he understands a boss. But in all due respect to this board and the experiences, his technical knowledge is far superior.
Absolutely.
But he's not going to play that card with you or probably with the staff.
If I could put it in crude terms, he's not going to rub our face in it.
No, he's not. He is, one of the advantages that he has, and maybe to a fault, he's polished. Big companies educate their executives, and he's on an executive level there. So they know how to work with groups.
And the other thing that was interesting when we did the first set of interviews, I asked him, because of his background, why would he want to come to a town the size of Rowley? I said,
Yeah.
what are you going to
Yeah.
do when there's nothing to do? Because this guy, you saw that book that he had on the table?
Yeah.
That's his planner.
Oh, wow.
He goes everywhere, and when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere with that planner. So he's busy all day long. And you know what he said to me? He said, I was kind of hoping that maybe I could help some of the other municipals.
Really?
If it gets to that point where he doesn't think he has enough to do, he's gonna step forward and say to Georgetown, or Groveland, or Merrimack, or
Well,
Ipswich,
yeah.
I have this degree, is there any way I can help you?
Well,
So, I mean, and like I say, my concern is the future. It really is the future. Because we have to stay current with the technology, or we won't be here.
no,
We'll be National Grid.
yeah. I already mentioned that before.
Yep. So, and this, smart grid it's, I don't know if you get any trade magazines these days, but I get the Electrical Contractor magazine,
No, I haven't been,
and
no.
every issue, it talks about smart grid. There's an article about smart grid. So it's not just something that might happen in this part of the world. It's happening throughout the country.
Yeah, yeah.
So it'll be here.
So where are you? Ken, have you got any leanings?
I hate to disappoint you, Dave, but I'm going against
So
you.
just do whatever you want. I mean, not
No,
disappointed.
I'm gonna go with,
You gotta go with
Dan Pryor.
Dan Pryor. Okay.
I mean, I would hope, Dave, that we could convince you to be, I mean,
They're all good. I mean, there's no
no, this
question.
no, I
You know,
agree.
I mean,
But I-
it is hard. You don't have to worry about convincing me. I mean,
Well, I mean, but I guess if I put myself in his place on the other side of the table here tonight, I would hope that the three commissioners would want me to do the job that they're looking for.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if you can do that, but I would hope that you could.
Oh yeah, I could. We'll see how your vote goes here.
Well, I'm not gonna be the chair, but I'm not even a voter.
You know that.
So, guess you have a motion on the table though.
Well, I mean, if we can come to an agreement, I would call for a motion, or let me first ask if there's any more discussion. I want to make sure everybody gets what they want to say onto the table.
I have no more discussion.
No, I have no more.
Okay, then I will ask for a motion to nominate one of these three candidates.
Just make sure we have the right name. All right, I'll make a motion that we hire Dan Pryor as the future general manager.
Well, if I could just, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Go ahead.
Believe me, I don't. I just wanted to say that rather than hire, that we offer the job.
Position.
Yeah, well, that's probably a better way than we offer.
Then that way
Make a
we.
motion that we
because
offer
we still need to
the job.
negotiate, we still need to negotiate a contract.
Oh, yeah.
After, that'll be the next phase.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a motion to nominate Dan Pryor and to offer the job to Dan Pryor. Do I
Yep.
have a second?
And I'll second that.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to offer the manager's position to Dan Pryor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion's unanimous.
Aye. And he was on the 95.
So I guess the next step is for Rick to notify him.
I will notify him tomorrow.
Okay,
I would like to suggest that I get to speak to his boss
okay,
as a reference
Mhm.
before you sit down and negotiate,
okay. Yes, actually, that's what I was gonna mention,
so that
that we do some background checking
so I
first.
can do the background checking, and I think it's important that I speak with his immediate supervisor,
Okay,
or at least one of his immediate supervisors. I would also suggest that this committee decide to the extent of the background that you want to do, whether you want to do things like a credit check, and I know, as Jackie indicated, you've never done that before.
right,
Whether you want to do that or not, that's a whole other step that that I think your town HR department needs to be brought into play on this.
Okay.
Because I can do a background check, but I can't do a credit check,
Mhm.
or even if that's consistent with their policy.
Right. Well, we need to do that. We need to do a background check.
And I'll do that tomorrow.
One of the things we need to do is a Cory check.
And I know your HR department does that.
Yes. Yeah. So and basically the requirements changed as of July 1 this year, which only requires a form be filled out by the applicant, and then the Cory check can be done by the town of Raleigh through its HR.
So will you take care of that?
Yes.
And I will take care of the references.
Yeah.
Now, and so once we have that, then you can begin the process. I'm going through process here. Go through the process of negotiating.
Yes.
How do you want me, what role do you want me to play in that process? In terms of, do you want me to get some preliminary done with him tomorrow? In terms of what kind of deal he wants to do? Because the issues that are on the table are salary. I believe, correct me, that your previous managers have had a vehicle,
Yes.
whether that's going to be part of the package or not.
Yes.
All right. And then the full benefits.
Right. And he kind of indicated that he would be getting benefits through his prior.
And I think those are things that we need to talk about.
Exactly. I mean, we need to find out what he needs, whether it's health insurance or whatever.
And it sounds like his wife's gonna be getting a job too.
Well, she has, I think that's part of their life plan.
What I'm saying is, he might not even need them, He probably won't even go after the benefits.
Well, I mean, that's something we just need to find out.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to him about the references, and I'm going to find out, do some preliminary around the negotiation with him. The next question is, we have two other candidates here. I need to talk to them and let them know that we are going to be extending an offer to another candidate.
Right.
All right?
But you can't rule him out in case this guy doesn't.
Well, no, we certainly don't want to close the door.
I'm not
Right.
closing the door with them, but I'm letting them know that we're going to be extending an offer to
At this time, yeah.
I think that's it.
That's it. Okay. So, yeah, and I know Jackie was interested in getting in on whoever the candidate was, wanted to talk to him.
Wanted to talk to them, and I think that was part of a transition.
And what I would like to do
Sure.
is at some point, maybe within the next week or two, maybe have him come back to Rowley and let me sit down with him and take him through the system
Sure.
and point out the various areas that we think we might need some work done, just to give him an idea of what's out there and what he might be getting himself into.
Absolutely. I think it's a good thing. As I said to you before, to all of you at the initial meeting, once the candidate has been offered a job and accepted a job, that's a vulnerable period between then and when they come on board, because their current employer may counteroffer them.
Mm.
There's that whole thing of buyer's remorse. So it is a good thing what you're suggesting, to maintain contact. I would suggest all three of you. You should coordinate it though,
That would be,
so that you could get him here, his family, till they see the community, that he can understand what's going on over at Rowley, connect him with a realtor, whatever it takes, so that he feels a part of the community and wanted. I think it's a big step that he has. It's a 3-0 vote. Split vote makes people nervous. So what we need to do is we'll begin this process. I will stay in touch with you about what's going on, but I'll get on those references as I get them. I will funnel them in,
Okay.
and you can begin the process. And your HR person is going to have to contact him for signature anyway on the Cory.
Yeah.
and whether they want to do credit or not.
Okay.
I guess conceivably you could do a criminal background check, but if you've never done that sort of thing, I don't know if you want to start that now.
Yeah, I don't know that we have done that. I mean, the Corey will give us a pretty good idea.
Corey gives you a good idea,
Yeah.
and the credit makes sense simply if you want to do that, simply because you're dealing with a lot of monies, and that's pretty standard for your fiduciary responsibilities in protecting the town and the light department specifically. So, I think you guys have done it. And now it's just a matter of us getting, the biggest part of the recruitment process is getting a candidate to say yes.
He will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I guess, is there anything else that we need to discuss? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second that motion.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.
That was unanimous.